Some weapons are only in the hands of the lucky few. They're divine weapons. These weapons represent a person's soul, giving them special powers. A noble family once took down the evil god, the Catastrophe Duchy. From the start, they had it all. Bodies made for battle, amazing skills, and truly incredible divine weapons. The main character was born into this family and dreams of being a great hero, proudly wielding his divine weapons. At least, that's how it was supposed to go. But during the oracle ceremony, everyone's divine weapon appears. He found out he wouldn't get one. This had never happened in his family's history, making him the first big failure. Because of this, he was seen as inferior and faced constant humiliation, being called a public disgrace. The family's second son, Zane, was naturally unsympathetic. To him, people like the protagonist, who failed to get a divine weapon, didn't belong there. He used this as a chance to mess with the protagonist's face, giving him some unintentional facial harmonization. Jessica and Sarah were just watching. Jessica, in particular, seemed to enjoy the humiliation. Sarah, however, didn't like what was going on. She tried to step in and stop it, but Jessica tripped her, making her fall. This was because Sarah was there to watch what happens to the weak with no future. She wasn't supposed to interfere. Seeing Jessica step on his friend's head worried him, but he was stuck in an involuntary massage. His attacker said that filthy hybrids are too close to each other. While hitting the protagonist, he kept insulting him. Being children of concubines, they were always humiliated, called mutts. After the beating, he apologized for being too weak to protect Sarah. With a big smile, the girl told him not to worry, because she promised to always be by his side. But the boy didn't want to stay in this situation. He told her he would get stronger, even without a divine weapon. He promised to protect her with his life. After they hugged, she thanked him for his promise. Unfortunately, just a few days later, he got kicked out of the family. He was hit hard by grief and anger. Knowing she would be in danger, he realized he had to get stronger to rescue her. Getting good with a regular weapon wouldn't cut it against a knight with a divine weapon, so he had to push himself even harder. He really had no other choices. He dropped a bag full of cash on the shop counter. Showing the gold coins, he said he wanted one of each type of weapon, which was pretty unusual. The shopkeeper thought the kid was gearing up for a personal war. It had been 2 years since he was kicked out of his family. On horseback, he kept moving forward. He had picked up some skills, but he still didn't have a divine weapon. In front of him were several enemies, dangerous monsters. He had plenty of weapons to fight them. He was ready to dive into battle because he had mastered all his weapons and was now quite powerful. He even had a gun perfect for dealing with debtors. The creatures were no match for him. After the fight, a hooded figure watched everything unfold before finally speaking to the boy. He asked if the boy always carried all those weapons, wondering if that was the worry of someone who hadn't gotten a divine weapon. He had forgotten about his trap and was looking for someone trustworthy. He was searching for someone with the potential to become a great hero. The protagonist could only see this mysterious figure as a rambling madman. Suddenly, a bright blue light appeared in the man's hand, shooting an energy bolt at the boy. A glowing object was right in front of him. It looked like a weapon. Lou, the protagonist, was genuinely amazed by what was happening. The man said he would trust the boy and left the weapon with him. The object still glowed as it released energy, stuck in the ground. He thought it might be a sword and walked closer until he touched it, only to find out it was just the sword's scabbard. The Divine Sheath of Avalon, which lets its users store their divine weapon and pass it on to someone else. Handed down through the ages, it now holds the weapons of the 5 greatest figures in history. Whoever wields it will have the best gear on the planet. The boy is determined to fully master that item. It's been 3 years since that moment. He was with his mentor when a dragon flew overhead, charging at them in a rage. The dragon was ready to unleash its flames and wipe out everything in sight. But the protagonist wasn't fazed at all. He quickly called upon Avalon, and the white sheath appeared in his hand, ready to draw a sword. Concentrating, he commanded the power to show itself. Suddenly, the sacred item began to glow intensely. Then, another glow appeared in the boy's hand. He formed the shield of Achilles, strong enough to create a solid barrier against the dragon's attack. To strike back, he summoned the Stormhammer Mjolnir. He positioned himself to take down the creature, leaping onto the dragon with the hammer ready for a huge hit. The blow was devastating, smashing the creature's head into the ground. Just one hit was all it took. His mentor announced that he had mastered Avalon. He told him he could now go to his sister, as even an S-rank paladin wouldn't be able to stop him. Hearing this, hope lit up protagonist dies. With excitement, he agreed to follow the advice. 5 years had gone by since his banishment. and he now had plenty of power to save his sister. As he moved forward, he hoped Sarah was safe, as he was on his way to rescue her from that awful place. But when he arrived, he found that fire had destroyed everything. He had no idea what had happened and felt a wave of worry. Amid the flames, he spotted several banners. He quickly recognized those symbols. They belonged to another duchy, the Rothwinzer. A fierce battle was raging, a civil war. This was really bad. He dashed into the castle, frantically looking for his sister, heading towards a huge gate that was slightly ajar. But as he stepped into the hall, he was faced with a heartbreaking sight. A badly injured body lay on the floor. This couldn't be real. That was his beloved sister's body. He scooped her up, filled with worry. She didn't respond at all. It seemed like the worst had already happened. He recalled the words he had said to her and the promise he couldn't keep. Overwhelmed with grief, a desperate scream echoed through the place. After honing his skills, he still couldn't achieve the one thing that had driven him all these years. A surge of energy shot straight at him. It passed right through the boy. His chest was pierced. There was another presence with him. That dark energy definitely came from a top-tier warrior. He recognized Bell, the one who had been exiled, but the boy couldn't figure out how he was recognized. But that didn't matter anymore, because he was about to join his sister in the afterlife. This was clearly the person who had taken her life. Lifting his sword, he was ready to take the protagonist's life, completely lost in his overwhelming sorrow, but he was already too weak to do anything. His chest was stabbed even more brutally. After all this, he found himself in front of the priest again. Looking at his hands, he couldn't understand how he ended up there. That stained glass window looked familiar. He was inside his family's cathedral. The ceremony was happening, and he was sure he had died. If this was the ceremony, then there was only one answer. He had come back in time. The priest told to put his hands together and picture his divine gear. But the boy already knew what was happening. At this stage in his life, he hadn't yet taken over Avalon and was bracing for exile to restart his journey. But something unexpected happened, leaving him stunned. There was no question about it. What he saw was his Avalon. He thought this time he could do it all over again. With the power he had now, he could change his destiny. His real life was finally about to start. The boy looked at the sheath in his hands, fully aware of its potential. It was so strange that even the priest, who had never seen anything like it, had comments to make. He already knew what the priest would say. Using a sheath in a fight wouldn't work. The priest, caught off guard, mentioned that wasn't what he meant to say. Still, the boy, filled with confidence, told him not to worry. That was the ultimate divine weapon. As he wandered through the castle halls, he was looking for his sister. If he was back in the past, she had to be alive. His past life was still fresh in his mind, and he was really worried about Sarah. Finally, he reached her room. A girl by the window heard the door open. Sarah greeted him with a big smile. She was definitely alive and well. She had the same beauty he remembered. Seeing her brother unexpectedly, the girl rushed over to hug him. She also wanted to ask how his ceremony went. The boy didn't even answer. He was just so happy she was still alive. The hug was so sudden that Sarah wondered if something was wrong with her brother. He still felt bad for not saving her in his past life. The memory of that pain was still too fresh for him. He wouldn't let his sister go through that again, and now he could finally keep his promise. It didn't take long for the girl to voice her annoyance about the hug. It was way too tight. Still, it was okay. She was glad to have gotten it. That's when she noticed something on her brother's face. Tears were streaming down, and she had no idea why. She ran her hand over his head, comforting him and saying everything would be all right since they had each other. Those words really warmed his heart. Turns out he grew up in Alabama. His annoying brother walked in, noticing how well the dogs were getting along. He had been searching for Belle for a while. That was Zane, the real sad one. The little brat claimed he already knew the news. His brother had gotten a strange item during the ceremony. Apparently, the priest loved to stick his nose in other people's business, a real gossip. Belle confirmed he got a sheath. His brother couldn't hide his disdain. Laughing like crazy, he said a sheath wasn't a weapon, and it suited that poor guy perfectly. He'd never be able to fight with that, and together they were a couple of fools. The protagonist had to clench his fist. He was tempted to give the little brat a lesson. Instead, he offered him a chance to take back his words, but the brat didn't get the hint. He wasn't used to seeing his half-brother stand up for himself, so the protagonist warned him again to retract what he said. Seeing this as a challenge, the little brat just got angrier. Now he was ready to teach the concubine's son a lesson. Unfortunately for the brat, the protagonist had years of tough training under his belt. He landed a hard punch to his stomach. making sure the kid would think about his actions from now on. The poor kid only avoided throwing up because his lunch had already settled. He fell to the ground, curling up. Maybe the hit to his liver made him feel faint. Looking down at the little jerk, the protagonist warned him not to mess with Sarah again, or he'd get a crash course in manners. Annoyed, the little jerk called his half-brother a bastard. He was ready to step up the violence. With his divine weapon, he vowed to make his brother beg for mercy. He planned to scorch his skin. If the little jerk wanted a real fight, so be it. He told Sarah to back off. Things were about to get interesting, but he reassured her that everything would be okay. He handled it all smoothly. Getting ready for battle, he summoned the powerful Avalon into his hand. Now he had the mysterious sheath. His brother couldn't believe he could lose to something that wasn't even a real weapon. After all, he was already an E-rank paladin. A punk like him didn't stand a chance. That was kind of important. Paladins were ranked. It all came down to their strength. Once they got their divine weapon, they started at F rank. By channeling mana into their weapon, they could move up to E rank. From D rank and up, that mana could be used for special attacks. To get past B rank, they had to master their gear's unique abilities. It was ridiculous that the little jerk was bragging about being E rank. He still had a long way to go. The protagonist didn't even feel challenged by this. His overconfidence just made the little jerk angrier. Being even more annoying, he called his brother cute. That was the last straw. He was ready to hit the mutt with everything he had. Sarah felt a wave of worry, knowing things could get dangerous. He placed his hands on the sheath and summoned the Sword of Light. Suddenly, Caliburn appeared, a truly impressive sword. The little jerk was in disbelief. His weapon's flames were no match for it. Plus, he had no clue what that sword even was. The counterattack knocked the little jerk off balance. Even more shocking was that his divine weapon got sliced by that sword. The boy watched in fear, realizing he was completely outmatched. He still couldn't wrap his head around what just happened, convinced there was nothing in that sheath. As the protagonist approached, he asked if the boy was satisfied, or if he wanted to beg for forgiveness. Like a true sore loser, he whined that he had been tricked. He didn't realize the boy was armed. If he had, he wouldn't have attacked since he was a coward. He even managed to threaten him, saying he wouldn't forget this. Then he bolted from the room, terrified and completely humiliated. The protagonist made sure to follow him. This wasn't over yet. Now he had a fire-spitting lead dispenser aimed at Ragnarok. With the little jerk in his sights, he pulled the trigger. The poor guy tried to run, realizing the bullet had whizzed dangerously close to his face, hitting the wall right in front of him. Staring at the bullet hole, he got even more scared. Everything was getting more confusing for him. It just didn't make sense. How could the boy be using a different weapon now? He had just wielded a sword. There was no way he could have more than one divine weapon. The protagonist warned him not to forget that. You shouldn't mess with Sira again. Either way, it was up to him to decide what to do next. And that little punk had no more underwear to mess up. His fear just kept growing. With icy eyes like a shark collecting debts, he warned the little punk that his actions could lead to a hole in his forehead. Terrified, the little punk bolted to save himself while the protagonist sheathed his divine weapon. Sarah, who saw everything, was totally blown away. She was okay, but she wanted to know if those weapons belonged to her brother. So he reminded her that he had already said she could trust him with everything. The girl thought that was really awesome, and all the protagonist wanted was to keep that lovely smile safe. He wouldn't let anyone get hurt again. Meanwhile, the little punk rushed to report what happened. He ran straight to his dad, telling the Duke he'd been humiliated like a dog. The Duke was curious about how Belle had multiple divine weapons. The little punk insisted that wasn't normal. Belle must have made a deal with Beelzebub, the lung shark. Because of that, he should be kicked out right away. But the Duke brushed him off, too caught up in the idea of having a powerful ally. Standing up from his throne, he completely ignored the little punk. When asked where he was going, he found out he was off to see Belle. He needed to see for himself if this was really happening. After that incident, the boy needed some time to rest. He headed to his bed to recover. He had won the fight, but he was still in a child's body. He was really worn out since he still couldn't fully control his mana. That should have been a fire shot, but it turned out to be just a regular shot. He was definitely still at F rank. He needed to work on his strength, but he knew he couldn't stay at this level of power. He started to remember the battle he had seen. It was the Rothwenzers that Mark was theirs. They were a family with an old feud. Any little thing could have sparked that fight. The one who attacked him had to be from that family. But this time, things were going to change. He was determined to protect his sister. To do that, he needed to earn more respect in his own family. The door to his room flew open. The boy turned to see who had come in. It had been ages since they last met, and he was clueless about why his dad was there. Galleon had done amazing things in that big battle from 20 years ago. He had faced the evil god all on his own, carving his way through the dark continent with just his sword. Many knew him as the swordmaster, and next to his dad stood that little punk. Now he got why his father had shown up. He was definitely being blamed for something. But this was actually a great chance for him. Getting noticed by the family head was the quickest way to earn respect. He bowed to show respect to the Duke. The old man said the boy had changed a lot since they last met. But this time, he approached him as a father and told him to relax. With surprising maturity, Belsa said that wasn't going to happen. One wrong word could be taken the wrong way, and he had to be careful around the Duke. The old man was impressed by the maturity of the kid. He told the boy to get up, and he did. He would act as the boy suggested, staying there as the Duke. Suddenly, his presence became intense. The Duke's aura was frightening. He found out that his sons had clashed, and sibling fights were not allowed. Bell showed a bit of regret, while the little punk thought he would soon see the jerk get what was coming. No one in that house could stand up to the Duke's power, but the boy had already steadied himself. He mentioned that he and his little sister had been bullied. After hearing this, the Duke asked if his orders had been broken out of childishness. The boy confirmed again and said he had no regrets, prompting the Duke to question if he really didn't regret defying him. Bell stated that abandoning those he cared for was an even bigger shame for a paladin. He would fight to protect his sister, even if it meant facing his older brother. While he spoke, the Duke watched him closely. This was the path he wanted to take that night. The Duke aimed his sword at him and asked what he would do if he had to face him. But the boy stood firm. He wouldn't back down, even if his opponent was the Duke himself. The old man tried to scare him with a glare, but he found himself admiring his son's toughness. He decided to overlook this incident, much to the little jerk's surprise. Looking at him, he felt let down that Zane had bullied his own sister and then lost a fight. The little jerk didn't see that coming. The Duke told him he should be ashamed and not show his face around him. He understood Bell's choice and recognized it took guts to say that, knowing the risks. The boy apologized for being reckless, but his father said that was the kind of attitude he expected from catastrophe knights. Now, he wanted the boy to demonstrate his power. He asked to see his divine armament. The boy complied. A blue light started to glow between his hands, and the Duke was even more impressed. That sheath was Avalon, his divine armament. But to the Duke, that didn't add up. He had heard stories about the legendary weapon that held the spirit of the original paladin. It had been wielded by great heroes throughout history. He asked if it was true that the boy had used both a sword and a gun, and Bell confirmed it. He explained that those weapons were contained within Avalon. To prove it, he showed both to his father. Right away, the Duke started to doubt if this was even real. To his shock, he learned that the boy could only use 2 weapons at once, even though there were 3 more in the sheath. His son was clearly meant to be the next hero. He told him he wasn't interested in the weak, but now he had high hopes for what was to come. As he walked out, he told the boy to keep pushing himself. The doors shut, and the boy finally got a chance to relax. That pressure was intense. He just had to keep getting better, but it was tough with a kid's body. He had to hit rank fast, and to do that, he needed to hunt monsters for more mana. He decided to head to the nearest forest to take down some orcs. Meg had finally fallen, and one of the creature's heads lay on the ground, separated from its body. The forest was still a scene of carnage. The creatures were powerless against something much stronger. The beast's teeth were as sharp as iron blades. It roared with fury, showing who was in charge. That forest definitely brought back some memories. After being exiled in his past life, he had trained here for a while, but something felt off. He had been walking for some time without seeing any monsters. From the bushes, a creature was watching him. He finally found some orcs, but they were in pieces. Their remains blended into the forest scenery. It was a sight that was both terrifying and strange. As he tried to figure it out, a terrifying sound suddenly startled him. The boy turned to see what was happening. An attack was already underway, and he had to defend himself. The force was stronger than him, sending him flying. This wasn't the creature he wanted to face. That was definitely Fenrir. The reason there were no monsters in the forest was this D-rank creature. He barely had any mana left and was at most E rank. He really wanted to get out of there fast. But when he looked into the creature's eyes, he knew he was done for. The boy had to stay sharp to avoid becoming a snack. He quickly realized the monster was way faster than he thought. He threw himself out of the way just in time. Grabbing his fire spanks pistols, he fired off a few shots at the beast, but the creature dodged every single one. He was definitely in deep trouble now. With his mana still low, his shots weren't quick enough. The gun just wasn't going to cut it. He needed a new plan. Sword in hand, he charged at the monster. The beast's claws were a serious threat, but the boy managed to dodge that nasty hit. This gave him a chance to strike back. He swung at the creature, but it dodged again. That was impressive. He didn't see that coming. He had to rethink his approach. This was getting risky. If he were at full strength, he would have wiped out the forest dog by now. The wolf lunged at him again, furious. Bell knew he couldn't match that speed, so he had to hold his ground and defend himself. Because of that, he took some hits. He was trapped now. There was no way to escape the onslaught. Slowly, the creature was closing in on him, ready to make him its next meal. Remembering he had just come back to life, he couldn't let it end like this. He needed to summon Achilles' shield. That way, he could defend himself and fight back. But the creature was so agile, it caught him off guard from the side. The boy fell, losing his grip on the shield. He couldn't keep fighting like this, or that aggressive dog would make him its next meal. The weapons he tried so far just weren't working, and using the hammer would be tough since its attacks were too slow. He had one weapon left to try. With no other options, he had to use it right away. The creature was ready to finish him off. The boy shut his eyes and concentrated. Just as the creature was about to hit him, he called for Aegis, but the attack had already landed. Surprisingly, nothing happened. Now he had a gauntlet in his hand, surrounded by dark energy. He hadn't wanted to use it, but it was better than dying again. The creature was gearing up to attack again, and it was even faster this time. But the fight was already over. The boy had gotten much quicker too. With the hammer in hand, he was now above the creature. They couldn't keep up with him, and the hammer was ready to smash. He landed a precise and powerful hit on the creature, which writhed in pain, its teeth shifting in its mouth. Aegis was the goblet of darkness. It boosted the physical strength of whoever wielded it, but that wasn't all. The user would start hearing a voice urging them to destroy. The wolf was still alive and even angrier. As time went on, the wielder grew stronger, and his urge to take lives grew. He eagerly awaited the creature's next move, dodging all its attacks. Now the wolf was at a disadvantage, and the boy looked like he was having a blast. Finally, the wolf was no longer part of the living world. The protagonist felt relieved to have ended it quickly. That weapon couldn't be taken off in battle, and its effects got stronger over time, pulling its user into darkness. Now he needed to figure out why there was a fenner in that forest. While he was thinking, he noticed something unusual about the hammer. It felt fully charged with energy. Now that he had beaten the creature, he could use its powers. Taking down strong creatures was way better than dealing with weak ones. He couldn't wait to give it a try. In the castle garden, his sister enjoyed the afternoon shade under a tree. Finally, she finished the flower crown. She hoped her brother would love the gift, but then someone grabbed the crown from her. The girl mocked her, saying the crown was ugly, just like the filthy girl who made it. That nasty girl was Jessica. She wanted to know what Spencer thought about it. The weird-looking boy agreed with Jessica. She expected him to follow her orders. As she threw the flower crown into the air, it got destroyed instantly. Spencer had used a whip to do it. Sarah wasn't happy about that, but she couldn't do anything. Jessica was just bored. There was nothing to do there. With a weapon ready, she invited Sarah to join her. It was time for her to practice and sharpen her aim, shooting at the girl who flinched in fear. Bell showed up, locking the shop with his sheath, saying he'd play with Jessica instead. Sarah was stunned. She hadn't noticed him arrive. In fact, she was totally oblivious to her surroundings. She never saw anyone come. Bell mentioned he was also looking for a chance to try out his divine armament, but Jessica was confused about what was going on. No mutt was going to stop her. Bell was too busy trying to reassure his sister, telling her everything would be okay. Now he had to deal with the arrogant girl. The boy with the awful hair tried to stand in a tough pose. Bell knew this guy was Jessica's servant, so he stood tall as the Duke's son. But he wasn't about to show any respect to a guy born from a concubine. This just annoyed the protagonist. Jessica was curious why he felt so confident when he was weak, and only got lucky beating Zane. They thought the protagonist had just gotten lucky, and that Zane had messed up. Plus, since he was only using a sheath as a weapon, he had to be the weakest around. He closed his eyes and told her it would be better for her to see it herself. Whether it was luck or skill, Jessica didn't expect any of this. She felt uneasy and told Spencer to deal with that trash right away, which he was eager to do. Wherever his whip hit, ice formed. Still, Bell wasn't impressed. Spencer was a D-rank paladin, and his divine weapon was an ice whip. He was way stronger than the little punk who was just E rank, but the protagonist was still the protagonist. The boy threatened to freeze his legs so he couldn't escape, then his arms and body until he couldn't move, finishing with slaps to his face until it was unrecognizable. Bell said he was talking too much and reminded the side character of his place. Spencer warned him not to underestimate him. Now he was going to turn him into an ice pop. The whip cracked toward Bell, but the boy dodged it easily. Jessica couldn't believe he pulled that off. For a D-rank paladin, he was decent, but still just a side character. The protagonist had trained hard in his past life. This was nothing more than child's play for him. Stara was even more impressed. Her brother looked like he was dancing. Meanwhile, Spencer got really annoyed, saying his target only knew how to run. So Bell would show him he wasn't running away. From now on, he wouldn't dodge anymore. Everyone there was stunned by his bold confidence. Bell wanted to see if the arrogant fool could back up his threats. Spencer took the bait and charged in to attack. He was ready to freeze him solid. The whip lashed out at Bell, who stood there with his arms wide open. It hit him several times, but he didn't flinch. Sarah was really worried. The ice had finally formed. His arms and legs were frozen now. If he couldn't move, it was Spencer's chance to hit him. Bell wanted to see if that was all Spencer had, because if it was time for him to strike back. Spencer hesitated at that. Bell quickly called for Ragnarok. The sheath at his side started glowing, and the gun appeared in his hand. To the arrogant fool, it seemed impossible that Bell had two divine weapons. To break free from the ice, Bell unleashed his mana, and flames began to pour from the gun. Now he could move again. Jessica couldn't believe Bell had pulled that off. It was unbelievable that he had two divine weapons, let alone that he could use them so well. Now it was time to punish this arrogant guy. He shot intense flames at Spencer. Spencer realized he was in serious trouble. He tried to defend himself with his ice whip, covering his body in ice, thinking it would block the flames. Bell knew this would be a piece of cake. The fire kept pushing forward. The bullet went straight through that block of ice. Spencer couldn't believe he was about to be hit so hard. The projectile slammed into his chest with huge force. The impact didn't go through him, but it did a lot of damage. He collapsed to the ground, leaving Jessica horrified. The mud had shattered the ice and taken down a Y-rank paladin, and since she was only E-rank, she knew she stood no chance. He looked at her and said it was all over. The girl summoned her divine weapon and warned him not to get closer. She was so scared that her hands shook as she held her weapon. She fired several shots but missed everyone. In a panic, she pleaded for him not to approach, but her feet wouldn't move. She collapsed, overwhelmed by fear. Bell stood tall in front of her. Jessica's fear kept rising. She faced someone who could easily take her life. He firmly warned her not to mess with Sarah again, and she couldn't reply. She froze up, only able to think about escaping while she could. Sarah rushed to her brother, feeling so thankful. She asked if the whip had hurt him, but he said Spencer was too weak to matter. Sarah praised Bell's strength, but he said he was only strong to protect her. She showed him a new flower crown she made since the last one was ruined. She placed it on Bell's head and thanked him for always being there. Bell received a special gift from his sister. One day, he would make the whole nation honor this kind soul. The issue was that many looked down on the children of concubines, making it tough to raise his status. He had to earn respect, and there was something he needed to do right away. Outside the palace, the Duke was deep in thought, holding his sword. His focus was truly impressive. After a while, he made a few cuts in the air, easily slicing through the fallen leaves. It was only then that he noticed Bell had come over. He asked the boy what he wanted. Bell was there to ask the Duke for permission. Curious, the Duke wanted to know what the boy was after. Before making his request, Bell knelt down in front of the Duke. The Duke appreciated the boy's respect. Bell wanted to take the exam for C rank. The Duke seemed interested in the boy's ambition. Bell expressed his desire to serve the king as part of his household. His family had duties to the royal family, like escorting missions and dealing with monsters, to keep their status. This was the quickest way for him to gain respect in his family. By completing tough tasks, he could earn recognition. To get the best missions, he needed to pass this exam. The Duke saw the boy's ambition but reminded him it was too soon for that. He needed to become a full-fledged paladin before thinking about C rank. Right now he was just at F rank, having only just received his divine armament. He should concentrate on the E rank exam first. What surprised the Duke was that the boy had something to show him. Holding up a fang, Bell asked if it was enough to change the Duke's mind. The Duke recognized it as a Fenrir fang. He quickly asked how Bell got such a thing. Without missing a beat, Bell revealed one of his divine weapons. The hammer was buzzing with electricity. Bell admitted it was tough, but he managed to train that stubborn mutt. Seeing the energy around the hammer, the Duke realized the boy could already use attributes. Plus, he had taken down a D-rank creature. The boy was definitely strong enough for the C-rank exam. He would let him take it, but only if one condition was met. He must never let the duchy down. Filled with confidence and gratitude, Bell promised he wouldn't. When he got to the exam location, he saw a bunch of candidates waiting around. For many, C rank was a huge hurdle that felt impossible to get over. The little boy stood out among the other candidates, most of whom were already adults while he was just a kid. He walked up to the exam desk. The attendant asked who he was and if he was there with his dad, but she was shocked to find out he was there to take the exam on his own. She suggested he come back when he was older. The boy insisted he shouldn't be treated like a kid, since he was also a paladin. While they were talking, someone came up to Bell and told him to stop pretending to be a paladin. Kids like him shouldn't be in a place like this. He was told to leave right away. Bell had no clue what this guy's issue was, but he sensed it was going to be a problem. The others recognized this guy right away. His name was Lennox, and he was the strongest D-rank paladin around. People said his divine armament, the wind sword, could make 8 slashes every time he used it. That was an incredible skill, and he already had a lot of fans. Lennox warned that if the kid wanted to take the exam, he'd better be at least as good as him. Bell didn't even realize this guy was well known among his peers. Meanwhile, this new guy doubted that Bell even had a divine armament. Holding the sheath at his side, Bell said it was right there with him. Seeing it was just a sheath, the young man laughed, thinking it was ridiculous to fight with something so useless. Other guys started laughing too. They never thought divine armaments could be so worthless, and they were glad they weren't as pathetic. Lennox said he didn't care if a clueless kid wanted to throw his life away, but it bothered him that Bell's participation in the exam made them seem like equals. As he walked away, he warned the kid to go back to his mom. Once that annoying encounter was over, Bell asked the secretary to sign him up. She wanted to know if he was really sure, but he stood his ground. To do that, he needed a recommendation from a B-rank knight or higher, plus he had to be at least D-rank himself. With that recommendation letter, he should be good to go, clearing up all the issues. The girl knew it was pretty unlikely anyone would recommend a kid. As she read the letter, she realized it was from the Duke of Kadistrov. That's when she figured out the kid in front of her was the Duke's son. The participants gathered in the arena, where the exam was set to happen. The instructor started explaining how the exam would go down. First, they'd be sent into a dungeon, using the teleportation stone. They had to go for 5 hours to come back with a jewel of light. There were 3 of them in the dungeon. Only those who got the jewels would move up. The cocky side character was sure he was meant to win. The competition looked scared, while the protagonist felt embarrassed for them. Once the explanation was done, the instructor asked if everyone was ready. Seeing the excited nods, they kicked off the exam right away. It was the protagonist's turn to step into the dungeon through the teleportation stone. The rooms lit up brightly, and he found himself in a totally different place. It felt like he had gone through a portal. He was finally in the cave. It looked like everyone ended up in different spots on the first floor, so he had to choose which path to take. The dungeon was big, but he had plenty of time. And since he had this chance, he needed to make the most of it. There were tons of creatures in the dungeon, and taking down more monsters would boost his mana. Right away, he grabbed his sword, ready to hunt every creature there. Meanwhile, the other candidates were having a tough time battling the monsters. They were tough and really dangerous. The lizard's eyes were scary and fierce, enough to scare off the weak. The cocky side character didn't get why the others were struggling with such weak monsters. He could wipe them out easily, and was grinning while doing it. His skills impressed the others as he kept defeating monsters. Full of himself, he boasted that he was far from average like the rest. Honestly, he found the challenge annoying. The side characters were glad to follow him since it kept them safe. With his crew, Lennox bragged that they were lucky to see his skills up close, claiming that weaklings like them were just there to tag along. After wandering around the dungeon for a bit, they stumbled upon a huge door. That's gotta be the last chamber. He was hoping to find some real fun there. To his surprise, there were several D-rank monsters inside, and the jewels were sitting on an altar at the other end of the room. One of the monsters started moving toward them. Lennox felt sure he could chop it up, swinging his weapon at the monster, but its tough hide took no damage at all. It was the creature's turn to strike back. For the first time in the dungeon, the cocky side character felt the heat from one of the monsters. The hit was so powerful that he stumbled, but he was still shocked that his attacks didn't do anything. Even the other side characters couldn't believe what they were seeing. They quickly got worried as the other monsters turned their attention to them. The guy from Clava had to act fast to save himself. He managed to hit one of the monsters attacking him, only to find out that physical hits were totally ineffective. Meanwhile, the woman was having a tough time with the flying creature. This specific monster could attack with its feathers without getting close. Lennox finally understood how tough this final exam stage really was. There was a monster that could resist all their divine powers. Against that creature, he was completely useless. Scared and frozen, he shut his eyes, bracing for the worst. But the terrifying monster was taken out before it could hit him. He opened his eyes, still in shock. Bell was relieved. If he had shown up a bit later, things could have gone really bad. He had a lot of fun hunting, but Lennox recognized him right away. It was that little punk taking the exam. A monster immune to physical attacks was coming for him. Bell needed to switch up his strategy for that creature. The sword was the perfect weapon for this. Lennox was shocked to see the boy's divine weapon had changed. Bell took out that creature with just one hit. Now he had to handle the one flying above. Luckily, he had the perfect gear for that, able to shoot multiple times. He filled the creature with bullets, turning it into a winged mess. The other characters were stunned that the boy was really this strong, especially since his divine weapon was just an empty sheath. Lennox couldn't figure out how he had so many divine weapons, let alone how the boy mastered each one. With time running out, he needed to finish off the creatures fast. Watching from the sidelines, the arrogant character couldn't believe a kid could be this talented. While he was still in shock, the main character kept taking down the monsters. With everything sorted, he just had to grab one of the jewels. He finally got to the altar where they were placed. The side characters came up to him, ready to shower him with compliments, which the protagonist found super annoying. They quickly showed their true colors by putting down the person they had just been praising. They claimed that compared to the kid, he was total garbage and they had always misjudged him. Linac's confidence was completely wrecked by that. The two side characters thought they would grab the last two jewels. Without a word, Bell summoned his hammer. He already had the jewel he needed for himself, and he was ready to do something really fun. He smashed the altar, shocking the two groveling side characters. They asked what the heck he had done. He had destroyed the remaining jewels. Showing them the last jewel, he told them that if they wanted it so badly, they just had to come and take it. He added that besides being useless, they were just leeches who thrived off others' talent, enjoying putting down those who were no longer useful. They didn't deserve to call themselves knights. Being scolded by a kid crushed their egos. Bell walked out, leaving the side characters behind. Lennox seemed to have learned something from that lecture, acknowledged his knowledge's flaws, admitting he had been arrogant and thanked Bell for it. But he wasn't going to let that hold him back. The main character was shocked to realize he had been honest and had goals, promising they'd meet again someday. Outside, the boy was celebrating. He finally reached C rank as a knight. After hunting a bunch of monsters, his mana had really shot up. Now he just needed to earn respect at home to protect his sister. He finally arrived at the Duke's place to share the news, but the Duke looked like he was in a serious meeting. Knights were plotting to take down the Meldia family. 3 B rank paladins were heading towards their territory, and the Duke's family was ordered to deal with them. Another noble family had issues with these paladins. Rumors said these knights had put forbidden spells on their weapons. The B rank paladins now got why they were called there. The Duke stated they couldn't let this karma keep going. They needed to wipe them out right away. One of the knights realized someone was missing. Jin wasn't there with them. A young man put a book on the table and asked what the meeting was about. The others quickly turned to see who it was. The young man announced that this group was already wiped out because he, the future Duke, would be the cause. Meanwhile, a maid was bringing food to her lady, letting her know the meal had arrived. Sarah gets ready to sit at the table. Being polite, she thanked the maid, who left without acknowledging her thanks. Sarah looks really sad. She stares at her meal with no excitement. Finally, her brother walks in, announcing his arrival. He looks at her with a big smile. Sarah replies the same way. She had no idea where he went and was really worried. Bell told her he had to handle something important and brought her gifts. On the table was a full meal. Sarah was thrilled about the apple pie that was brought in, and she can't wait to share it with her brother. But now isn't the right time for that. The food is always the same since even the staff look down on the kids of concubines. He needs to step up to improve his sister's life right away. The meeting with the Duke is still going on. He's impressed that one of his sons took down Carmel all by himself. This means Jin has already hit level A. As the Duke's oldest son, he's clearly on a different level. After that, he sat down at the table. He wants to know if his dad has more to say. He mentioned that the king had given their family another task. They were to escort Princess Rilke Schautenwallen. She would be passing through a city near the duchy, and they needed to make sure she traveled safely. One knight questioned if the royal guard was sufficient. Another knight pointed out that the royal family shouldn't be told that karma was no longer a threat. So, the safest route would take her through Ricotta. While they were discussing, someone else walked into the hall. The boy asked them to hold off on making a decision. His presence grabbed everyone's attention. The knights recognized him as Bell. The Duke couldn't help but feel proud of his son's skill. It seemed like the exam was already wrapped up. Holding up his certificate, the boy proved that he now belonged to level C. It's impressive he achieved this at such a young age. Now, the Duke wanted to know why he interrupted them. He had a different route suggestion for the journey. One knight was surprised that a boy had a suggestion. The route through Ricotta has no monsters, but it's filled with bandits, and the trip would take 3 days. It would be better to go through the monster plane. One knight warned that place is definitely risky, but the boy knows the monsters that live there. Most of them are creepy chimeras and dark horrors. Since they're night creatures, traveling during the day is way safer. Plus, it would only take a day to get there. The knight had to admit he agreed with that. After hearing the boy, the Duke realized he was confident and knew a lot about monsters. Now, it was up to the others to weigh in. The boy was eager to take on this task, believing he could safely guide the princess. His confidence left the Duke deep in thought. Finally, Jin jumped into the conversation. A tense energy filled the room. He wanted to know why this mutt was talking to them. The vibe was so intense that even a plant on the table dried up, making the other knights uneasy. Belle had forgotten just how scary her older brother could be. Still, that wasn't enough to rattle him. Showing off his divine weapon, he said he was serious and could safely escort the princess wherever she needed to go. Curious about the boy's confidence, Jin asked if he could stop him. Belt insisted that a knight keeps his promises. Jin told the boy to be quiet since his words were blasphemy against him. This was Razor, his brother's secretary, who was probably a level B paladin by now. Jin seemed really interested in the boy and asked his secretary to test him. He then showed his divine weapon, ready to take down that kid. He planned to teach the son of the concubine a lesson. He started moving toward the boy, who seemed very aware of everything around him, even though he hadn't budged. The secretary was about to strike first. Bell realized this could be tougher than he thought. Still, he managed to defend himself well, which impressed the secretary. Jin also seemed to like what he saw. That was quicker than he expected. It's still too soon for him to beat a level B paladin in a fight. The Duke firmly declared that was enough and said Bell would handle that task. The secretary asked if the Duke was for real. Since Jin had already wiped out Karma, this wouldn't be an interesting first mission. Bell thanked him respectfully, promising he wouldn't let anyone down. Jin watched the boy closely, but his creepy grin hinted at something else. Bell had to head to the royal palace. It was his first time ever visiting that place. He walked up to the gates to make his entrance, but the guards stopped him, saying he couldn't just walk in. The boy introduced himself, showed his paladin certificate, and mentioned he was there to escort the princess. The guardsman found it hard to believe that such a young kid was already level C. Once he proved his identity, he was allowed to pass through. The guards were skeptical about the kid being able to protect Her Highness, but the protagonist was totally determined. Finally, the princess's carriage showed up. She said her bodyguard was really cute. She apologized to him, saying she wouldn't need his help. The guy on the throne wanted to know if the princess had left yet. His servant confirmed she must already be on her way. Along with several guards, the Duke's son was also part of her escort. He heard this son is Bell, who's still just a kid. Thinking he must be super skilled, he told his servant to be careful and allowed him to use his secret weapon if needed. With blades in hand, he claimed it wouldn't be necessary since his specialty is taking people out without them even knowing. The carriage rolled on. Inside were the princess, the protagonist, and the guards. That task is pretty simple but really important. Finishing it is crucial for helping his sister, but there's a twist. He doesn't feel comfortable at all. It looks like he hasn't been welcomed well. Apologizing for what might be a rude question, he asked why the princess thought he wouldn't be needed. She took a moment to reply, saying she doesn't like relying on others. She has her own divine weapon and isn't as weak as people think. The boy realized she was even more full of herself than he thought. The princess kept staring outside. Life in the city carried on as usual, which seemed to spark something in the princess. She gazed outside with excitement. The boy loved seeing her happy, but the princess felt uneasy about it. He apologized, saying she reminded him of his sister, who would have reacted the same way to all this. The princess asked if they usually got along. Belle shared that they play a lot when they're together. Since she's still young, their games are pretty simple. The princess mentioned having many siblings, but not trusting any of them. Thinking it might be about succession issues, Belle felt bad for her. He said he faced a similar situation at home. His siblings often bullied them for being the children of a concubine. With his mother gone, there's no one to protect them. The princess seemed intrigued by that. Belle probably felt the same and could talk to him if she wanted, but she didn't want to rely on anyone, especially not him. The boy didn't know her situation, and assuming he understood was disrespectful. They were being watched outside the walls. Night finally fell. They reached their destination in just one day as planned. But for the princess, it had been really tiring. The gates opened, and she was welcomed. She just didn't know who this young man was. His name was Peter, a knight from the kingdom, and he said they were glad to finally have her. Belle had heard of Peter before, but couldn't remember at that moment. He thought it was odd they were welcomed outside the city. Those who set up the ambush were ready to strike, while the princess's group stayed outside. The boy noticed a lot of guards, but it still felt suspicious. A dagger was thrown at them. Belle realized the princess was an easy target out in the open. He reacted fast and shielded her with his special weapon. She and her guards were instantly shocked. An attack was happening, and the princess was the target. Several daggers were aimed at her. With so many attackers, this could be serious. Peter was also ready to jump into action. Thanks to his sword skills, he kept the princess safe. He wouldn't let anything harm her. Seeing what the knight could do, Belle figured he must be pretty strong. The assassins needed to escape. The ambush wasn't finished yet. Peter told his knights to chase the attackers while the princess was escorted out. Belle stayed outside as the princess was led away. She glanced back, feeling quite uneasy. Inside, they assured her she was safe, but the princess insisted she could handle herself. Just then, the knight was attacked. The princess, unaware of the danger, was terrified. The one who attacked was Peter himself. Now she realized the real threat was right next to her. He looked at the guard who had just died. His sacrifice was completely pointless. The princess had no idea what would happen next. Peter told her life would end soon. Even after claiming she could defend herself, the princess was utterly vulnerable. The knight moved closer to her. She was so scared that she couldn't call on her divine weapon. Peter showed his true colors, grinning wickedly. The princess now needed someone to rescue her. The room's window shattered unexpectedly, catching Peter off guard. One of his men was taken out, and the boy who was supposed to escort the princess was the one behind it. It was surprising that it was him and not someone else. He apologized for being late and finally climbed down from the window. He told the princess that from now on, the task was his to handle. Peter thought the guards would be distracted outside. He didn't think the boy could beat him, but then he remembered who he was. Peter was left feeling very puzzled. His real name was Von Wriggle, which shocked the knight. He never expected the kid to know that. If his divine armament had 2 combos with 3 thunder dice, he had already taken out some counts and even a Marquess. Impressed by the kid, he was curious how he figured all this out. In his past life, he was the one who brought him to justice, so he knew these details. The boy never thought he'd go after the princess, but now he couldn't escape his fate. Even though he was just a kid, Peter felt a bit intimidated. Still, he found the situation interesting. Even if the kid had investigated him, he wouldn't be able to beat a level B paladin. It could indeed be a tough challenge for him. But against Peter, he wouldn't have any trouble. Annoyed by the kid's boldness, he warned him he'd regret those words. The boy knew Peter would start by throwing his weapons, and that's exactly what he did with his daggers. The boy dodged all of them easily since he anticipated the surprise attack. When Peter slashed diagonally with his right hand, he was shocked to miss every time. But the boy already expected the sneak attack from behind. His hand was ready to summon his divine armament, and he blocked the surprise strike with his sword. He was familiar with all those moves. Peter couldn't grasp how that little brat could match his speed. Belle claimed he could take him out anytime, so if he cared about his life, he should give up now. But his opponent was filled with intense anger. Fullen underestimated him and threatened to shred that kid into pieces. His rage made his attacks even easier to predict. That was his downfall. Fueled by anger, he swung wildly, but he couldn't land a hit on a child. The princess was impressed by his fighting skills. Even though he was small, he was taking on an assassin like it was nothing. He blocked all those attacks. The princess realized she had been talking way too much. The ring on her finger started to glow, and the protagonist, losing his patience, declared he would end this for good. His first strike against his opponent landed successfully. Peter had taken a hit. He needed to rethink his strategy. He noticed that his every move was being anticipated. Everything was unfolding just like his boss had warned. That kid might be really gifted, or there was something else going on, so he couldn't let his guard down. Facing this challenge, he decided to pull out his strongest card. The protagonist was aware of this. He planned to use his ability to create an unbreakable barrier of light, confidently saying he could handle this challenge. Peter thought the boy was just being cocky, so he started to open that tiny vial. Even knowing what it was, the protagonist felt uneasy. Those were the tears of the Dragon King. After he tossed them to the ground, it looked like he had used some kind of booster. That was a rare item that temporarily boosted the user's mana. Peter said he would make the kid regret not being careful. He threw his daggers, but this time it was different. They were way more powerful, and the boy had to be cautious since he was now surrounded by those blades. The daggers hovered in the air, completely surrounding him. Peter thought victory was finally his because the boy was trapped inside a barrier of light. He felt himself being lifted off the ground by some magnetic force. The princess started to worry about her bodyguard. He had to use his shield to try to break free. He swung it to smash the barrier, but the wind it created just wasn't strong enough. Peter wasn't finished showing off his skills. His daggers began to glow even brighter with an electric light. Energy surged through the entire barrier. Inside, the boy writhed in pain. Peter promised to wrap this up quickly. Almost losing consciousness, the boy realized he couldn't go down like this. While he was weak, arrows started flying across the room, all aimed at the daggers. This completely shattered the barrier. Only then did Peter understand what was going on. The princess had managed to use her divine weapon, while the paladin risked his life to protect her. She couldn't stay scared forever. Her intervention only made Peter angrier. He lunged at his target to finish him off, and now the princess was gripped by fear. But the protagonist just needed that little bit of help. Finally, the assassin realized he was in deep trouble. He took a heavy hit that knocked him out. It was enough to leave him incapacitated. Bell had won the duel. His opponent's body crumpled to the ground, completely still. Once he was back on his feet, he asked if the princess was okay. With a sad look in her eyes, she didn't respond. But she walked over to the boy. Touching his face, she told him he was the only one hurt in that room. Apologizing, she said he had been dragged into the succession conflict against his will. But the boy reassured her it was fine. In fact, the princess was as strong as she claimed. She said she wasn't as tough as her bodyguard. Thankful for his help, she promised that she'd always have his back if he needed it. The boy knelt down, thanking the princess for her support. She looked at him with admiration. Taking off a ring, she asked him to keep it. Belle knew it was a special gift to show her appreciation and friendship. This wasn't just any ring. Finally, the mission wrapped up without any casualties. The Duke welcomed him and listened to everything that happened during the princess's escort. Belle mentioned he finished the job, but the Duke sensed there was more. The boy was wearing Solomon's ring. The princess had given it to him as a sign of her trust. It was a precious artifact. It was one of the royal family's treasures, a source of mana. It was hard to believe the boy had gotten his hands on it. He might be even more remarkable than the Duke thought. Realizing this, he couldn't hide his pleasure. He told the boy he would enroll him in Athens right away. He didn't see that coming. Athens was an elite academy for paladins, only open to noble families. Most of his family had private tutors. Tradition said only potential heirs attended the academy. This meant he was now in the running to be the heir. The Duke told him to keep training until he heard about his classes. The boy had something to say, and his father wanted to hear it. Standing firm, he had a request to make, and doors opened. He was already outside with his sister, who was thrilled. She couldn't believe this was her new room. Her bed is way more comfy now. The Duke himself allowed this. He asked to move into the main house to earn respect. The girl can't hide her excitement. She sees something off with the boy's hand. There's a small cut on it. He mentioned he got hurt during his last task. This worried her a bit, but they quickly went back to playing. That made him feel even better. Sarah would definitely be well cared for from now on. Now he needs to think about his future. In 5 years, a disaster is coming. His sister could be in danger again, so he needs to find out who's behind it. To do that, he must become the heir of his family. Jin's servant heads to his room to report something. Yubao is waiting for the go-ahead. But Jin stays focused on his painting, really concentrating. The servant said the bastard brother is going to Athena Academy. He was the first since Jin himself. They should get rid of him right away. But Jin wasn't interested. He set his painting aside for a moment. He said his brother isn't a threat for now. His brother's growth could actually help him too, because there was something he really loved doing. His servant was surprised by that. Jin showed himself to be a true degenerate who loves crushing things after they fully develop. So, it would go down as he wanted. Even though his master had already given the order, he thought this was a risky move. The boy had several divine weapons and had already beaten a level B paladin. He had to act fast just to be safe. Bell was out training, working on his special skills, and it was best to sharpen them before heading to the academy. The catch was that he'd need to hunt a ton of monsters. Through his sword's reflection, he noticed his brother's servant coming his way. He had to stay on guard as the man approached. He was getting closer, speaking formally, which was surprising for someone who was supposed to be an enemy. Recognizing him as his brother's servant, he asked what he wanted. The man apologized for the other day, saying it was rude to point a sword at one of the Duke's sons. The protagonist thought maybe he was a decent guy, so he told him not to stress about the past and thanked him for his kindness. He mentioned he had something else to talk about. The boy still had his sword out, and the servant asked if he wanted to join him on a monster hunting mission, which was a bit unusual. He noted that his master, Jin, and the other paladins had other plans. He was impressed by the boy's skills and wanted to lend a hand. It was a pretty odd invitation. He couldn't turn it down since he was the Duke's son, but he knew he had to be careful. He agreed to the invitation, and the man thanked him sincerely, as he intended to take him out during this mission. The protagonist asked where they were headed. They were going to a remote spot called Ika, and he knew exactly what that place was. He might have forgotten, but it was perfect for using a special method to boost his mana. Ambrosia was a rare item that permanently boosted a user's mana. The carriage rolled out toward the monster hunting location. The protagonist was inside, eager to take down some creatures, thinking about how awesome it would be to get some ambrosias. But the chances of finding it were pretty low. To get it, he needed to find a hidden dungeon, and he knew where one was near the city called Ithaca. Since it was already night, they had to look for a place to stay. The man would share the necessary details. They had to take out some leviathans. They had been told that several of them were in that area. They were level sea monsters. Since it was late, they decided to start at dawn and needed to get some rest. The boy mentioned he would head to his room. As he went up the stairs, someone was watching him. The man thought he was a fool who had no clue what was going on. He planned to make everything look like a random accident. No matter how skilled he was still only level C. Taking him down would be a piece of cake. Once he got to his room, he figured Razor was probably already asleep. He summoned his shield using wind magic through the window, which let him use the artifact in a surprising way. It turned into a flying platform, and the hidden dungeon was in the monster forest. He and his master discovered it ages ago, but no one knows where it is. Finally, the boy's feet hit the ground. As his artifact fades away, he pictures the dungeon's location. Right in front of him is a small entrance. The boy starts exploring inside and finds a huge portal. This was exactly what he had been searching for. You can tell hidden dungeons by their color. The blue ones are level A. A green gate is level B, and if he completes it, he'll get ambrosia based on the dungeon's level. That'll definitely be a big help. The boy is ready to step through the gate. He has to defeat the boss creature of the dungeon. In his past life, he faced it at level D. His master warned him it was too soon, and it might still be tough for him now. But he can't back down just because he's scared. He put his hand through the gate. As he passed through, he thought about how he needed to get stronger fast. Inside the dungeon, he was already fighting the first creature, but it didn't seem too tough. He watched the Phantom Knight move, ready to charge and attack again. It struck quickly and accurately, but the boy managed to keep defending himself. He spotted a gap in the knight's attack and hit it while it was wide open. But his hit didn't take it down. Instead, the force sent him flying back. He had to switch to a heavy hammer. With the hammer, he landed another strike, but the knight still looked fine. Regular hits weren't enough to break that armor. He had to try a different approach. Grabbing his sword again, he made it glow. He was ready to use magic. The blasts hit the armor, but they didn't do any damage. He had never faced a creature like this, but he realized he was still at level C. The Phantom Knight kept attacking him. He was at a disadvantage and needed a new plan fast. If a creature has a shield, it must have a weakness. The boy seemed to have figured something out. A mana-infused bullet should work. Now it included fire. He started charging his attack while the knight closed in. Just 2 seconds left until it was ready. The creature got closer, almost in range to hurt him. Finally, when it was close enough, his attack was fully charged. He fired the shot at the armor, And it really worked. It was strong enough to break through. The creature fell down, defeated. The boy also collapsed from the kickback of the shot. With the fight over, he let out a deep sigh of relief. A magical attack was the knight's weak spot. It just needed to be powerful enough. If he hadn't had a divine weapon, he would have been in big trouble. The dungeon boss was scary, but that's what you expect from a hidden dungeon. Still, getting rare loot from those monsters was a sweet chance. That potion could boost his stamina and mana. The boy chugged it right away since he needed energy to keep going. And that's exactly what he did, taking down every creature until he reached his goal. Behind that huge gate had to be the strongest beast. He wasn't sure if it would be a demon or a giant snake, but he was about to find out. Finally, he stepped into the main hall. It looked like some kind of arena. The boy started to hear noises. A shadow appeared before him, looking like a knight. He felt his body shake and his mouth went dry. The pressure was intense, and the creature he saw was genuinely dangerous. Its eyes shone with a bright red glow. The knight moved closer. It was definitely the boss of the dungeon. He was getting ready to face that terrifying monster. The boy had to stay completely focused. The Phantom Knight glanced at its sword, quickly shifting its weapon. An attack was definitely coming. In a flash, the boy had to react, or his fight would end way too soon. The destruction that followed was totally overwhelming. Bell managed to back off a bit, but he still had to dodge the crushing hits. Getting hit by any of those attacks would be deadly. Once more, the creature turned toward him, making the boy jump away. That was his chance to summon his sword. Now he could attack too. Spotting an opening, he hit the Phantom Knight in the back, but its armor was tougher than he thought. Once again, he struggled to break through that steel. The boy had no time to waste. He had to keep his focus on dodging. He decided to try the tactic that worked well before. With his fire spitter, this was his best bet. This time, he would charge it up much longer. A full 5 seconds. He still needed a bit more time to power up the attack. As soon as it was ready, he shot at the Phantom Knight, hoping it would be enough to win. The attack flew toward the creature, hitting it cleanly without any defense. To his shock, it had no effect at all. He spotted a strange mark on the Phantom Knight's chest. That magic resistance was really strong. Once again, the boy found himself trapped. He was lucky his agility helped him keep dodging. Needing more defense, he decided to use his shield too. With it, he managed to block a direct hit, but that power was way too dangerous. With shaky hands, he realized something was off. The Phantom Knight was changing its attack style. This time, it was coming from above. Preparing for a deadly strike, Bell had to act fast. The Black Knight's sword hit the ground, completely shattering the arena floor. As the dust rose, it lost sight of the boy. Finally, he revealed himself again, putting more distance between them. He didn't have enough mana to break through that armor, and soon he noticed the dust had hidden his enemy until he saw a glow forming. His body sensed a bad omen. The creature's sword had been thrown at him. He had to rely on his shield to avoid being finished off. The blade ricocheted far away, and the boy realized the attacks weren't over. That strike was just a distraction. The real danger was coming from behind. He was completely helpless, his body writhing in pain from the brutal hit. It lay there on the ground, still wanting to finish him off by stomping. Even though he was weak, Bell managed to dodge again. He only felt better because he had taken an elixir. Without it, he would have lost. The issue was he had no options left, and the creature had its sword back. With no chance of winning, he had to take a risk. His shield was the heaviest thing he had, which sparked an interesting idea. He thought he could throw it fast enough using wind magic. Suddenly, the shield became a weapon. Now he had his most powerful projectile, but his plans fell apart. The Phantom Knight dodged, which caught the boy off guard. And this time, he was totally unarmed. He had nothing to block that blade. Trapped, he realized he couldn't dodge. Now he had no shield for protection. He needed to adjust the trajectory to survive. Surprisingly, the shield hit the creature, giving him just enough time to dodge the sword. Seizing the moment, the boy moved forward. This time, he planned to switch up his attack. He hoped his hammer would deal some damage. The Phantom Knight knew it couldn't dodge this time. The impact was devastating. After that, the creature collapsed, defeated. Bell was panting after that intense fight. His shield strategy was risky, but it worked really well. Now, he needed to stab whatever was inside that armor. But the boy took too long. The knight was back on its feet. The fight wasn't over yet. Suddenly, the armor started to fall apart, showing the creature's real form, which the boy didn't quite get. The monster was about to grab a latch on its sword guard, pulling out what looked like a new weapon. It was some kind of lock. The sword was still in its sheath. Now it was finally revealed. The boy never thought something like this existed, and now he had a new enemy. The creature was moving much faster. Bell struggled to keep up with the attacks, getting slammed against the wall. The pain in his body was unbearable. After hitting the ground, he was too weak to keep fighting, and the creature kept coming closer. His senses were fading, and the dungeon boss was ready to finish him off. Even without strength, the boy tried to get up again, knowing that doing nothing would mean the end. He could barely lift his head. A slash came at him, but he dodged it. He was using the gauntlet. The creature's luck had finally run out. The monster was clueless. Its victims seemed completely drained. Meanwhile, the boy summoned his sword. For the first time in this fight, he managed to pressure his enemy. Now the real battle was about to start. They began trading blows. Both were much quicker now, and the fight spread across the whole arena. Without armor, the monster had actually gotten stronger, but it still wasn't a match for the protagonist with the gauntlet's power. He felt confident he could win this. The colored marking on the monster's body changed. It now glowed bright red. The protagonist's sword went right through the creature's illusion. He quickly realized he hadn't hit anything, forcing him to brace for an attack he barely noticed. That color shift made the creature even quicker, putting more pressure on the protagonist. But he wasn't beaten yet. He just needed more strength to win. As power surged through him, things got riskier. That rush of strength felt absolutely intoxicating. A horrifying image flashed in his mind. The gauntlet was cursed. To gain that power, he had to sacrifice his own soul, and the protagonist was ready to make that deal. A strange aura started to wrap around him, making him lose control. He couldn't fight off that much power. It felt like he was fading away. The entity told him he really needed power now. His suffering came from his own weakness, which is why he had always been held back. His weakness had cost him his life. By now, he should be worn out from being so powerless. It was time for him to take what he wanted through strength. Little by little, he was losing grip on himself. The creature saw this as a chance to finish him off. But the protagonist had already transformed his power, now matching the creature's strength. The shockwave from their blades colliding was massive. He was driven by one thing now, an unquenchable thirst for destruction. He didn't just want to win anymore, he wanted to obliterate, and the creature was just the first hurdle. After that, he'd destroy anything else in his path. Even as he teetered on the edge of losing control, the boy thought of his sister. That sparked a bit of awareness in him. Bell was still battling the powerful creature. He realized he couldn't pay this price now, because he had a beloved sister waiting for him. His fights weren't about taking lives. The real reason he wanted to get stronger was to protect his sister. This helped him regain control. Now it was time for that creature to give up its power. Aegis was seriously powerful. He easily pushed the dungeon boss back. The entity tried to lure him in, saying it would grant him its power if he offered his soul. But the boy hesitated because of his inner struggle. Still, he decided to strike first, and the creature charged at him too. They both readied their attacks, only to dive back into fast-paced combat. The creature tried to catch him off guard with a mana attack, but he was quicker. He managed to disarm it, severing one of its arms. This made it impossible for the creature to keep fighting, and the protagonist seized his chance, slicing the creature in half. Finally, it looked like the monster was completely defeated. Bell was the victor of that battle. Still feeling the power coursing through him, he watched as the lifeless creature began to break apart. That challenge was over, and he could finally get rid of the cursed gauntlet. That enemy had been way too strong, and he almost lost control. He had to avoid using that gauntlet as much as he could. In front of him, a small vial appeared. It was the ambrosia he had been looking for. Drinking that vial would give him as much mana as a level B paladin, letting him use his divine armament skills. Honestly, he had never seen ambrosia before, and he felt a bit uneasy, but he knew he had to drink it for a better future. At first, he didn't feel any change, but soon, he noticed his mana rising significantly. It was amazing, he instantly reached level B. But with the power came pain. It was so intense that he felt like he couldn't handle it. His chest throbbed, and it felt like his body was on fire. The sheath at his waist started to glow brightly. Not sure what was going on, he collapsed and passed out. Now he was lying in the middle of a magical circle, waking up feeling really confused. He had no clue where he was. It felt like he had been zapped to another dimension. A man greeted him as he woke up. It was his mentor, and it had been ages since they last met. Even with his face covered by a hood, the boy recognized him right away. There was no doubt this was his master. There were other people around too. A girl with a hammer, a guy hiding something, and a knight with a sword. Everyone welcomed him warmly. It was the first time he had ever experienced anything like this. This was the realm of souls. Seeing his student again really moved the man. The boy was also thrilled about the reunion. His master's name was Ragus. He was the one who had given him Avalon. He was the original holder of the Achilles' shield. Seeing his master out of the blue was amazing, but he was totally confused. He didn't understand how he remembered him since he had traveled back in time. The master explained that he had been keeping an eye on his student from this place. He had seen his death and rebirth. This made the boy curious about what this place really was. It existed within Avalon, where divine weapons and the souls of their successors were kept. This left the boy puzzled. He wanted to know where his former master's body was. He said his body was probably somewhere in the mountains, enjoying retirement. Avalon was a divine weapon that connected with the souls of its users. By carrying it through time, its user lost touch with it. But his mind stayed connected to his body. The boy thought that his armament must have sent him back in time, but his master wasn't so sure. At least, he didn't think the armament could do that. The boy was surprised that even his master couldn't answer that question. Reunited, his master praised him for doing a great job protecting his sister. His master congratulated him, but the boy felt shy about the praise and wanted to know why he was there. Just as his master was about to explain, one of the souls started to stir. He mentioned that they were taking too long and wanted to join the conversation. His name was Raven, the guy who wielded the fire spitters. The master reminded him that he wasn't done talking to his disciple yet, but the man asked him to lighten up, saying he wasn't a stone golem. Meanwhile, the boy just stood there, totally confused. He introduced himself to the sixth successor and said it was nice to meet him. The boy paused for a moment, deep in thought. When he reached out to shake his hand, he realized the guy was just messing around. This man was super laid back, which the boy found puzzling. Riven found the boy's confusion pretty funny. He remarked that the sixth successor was quite naive. The girl joined them too. Charlotte pointed out that the newcomer was still getting used to everything, but the man insisted it was just a harmless joke and asked if Haru agreed. Still, he was really shy. Besides being the fourth successor, he asked them not to talk to him. The girl knew Revan loved to tease people. He told her not to get so worked up, saying it would ruin her looks and give her wrinkles. Charlotte did not take that comment well. The master tried to get them to stop bickering, but she didn't like Regis's attitude. Before she could say anything, she had to deal with the jokester's antics. It felt odd for the boy to see his master so carefree in that situation. It just showed how powerful his predecessors really were. He had already asked his master about them. They were all legendary heroes who fought against evil. The guy with the sword told them to get to the point. Adam, the first successor, confirmed there was a reason for the meeting. They could bring the boy to that dimension to give him a heads up. When he found out, he asked what it was about. The sixth successor had to learn how to use his divine arms. This news caught him off guard. When mastered, divine arms unleash a huge amount of mana. If he tried to unlock them now, it could seriously hurt him. That's why he's in so much pain. He needs to wait until his body is ready to tap into this power. But the boy has urgent needs. He feels he can't afford to slow down now. He needs all this power to protect his sister. Adam saw that the boy was determined, and there was only one thing left to do. He decided to take the boy down right there. He didn't expect Adam to be so quick. He had to defend himself from that attack right away. That's when he realized Adam was already behind him. The boy got hit by the back of the sword. Adam hoped this would show him he's still too inexperienced, but he didn't consider that the attack could be blocked. Given this, he needed to rethink his strategy. The boy's recent battles have pushed him to improve a lot. Maybe he is capable after all. He should first focus on mastering the sword. All the successors are counting on this, and the boy wants to know if he's finally been accepted. Adam confirmed it. If he sticks to just one ability, he might be able to control it. He's allowed to unlock the B-level abilities of the Caliburn sword. He'll get the other abilities when the time is right, including those of a level. Abilities that are truly amazing. The boy insisted he'd unlock them right away. Adam appreciated the kid's determination and hoped number 6 would have some luck. Everyone was counting on the main character to keep his little sister safe. Even if he was quiet and reserved, they'd be watching him closely from the shadows. It's time for the boy to get back to his body. He woke up in the dungeon. He didn't feel any pain, but something felt off. Thinking about the sword's power, he was eager to use it against the monsters. He already knew the sword had a special ability. To reach the monsters, they had to take a boat, and now they were halfway through their journey. The young man warned that the Leviathans would show up soon, so it was time to gear up for a fight. What he didn't realize was that everyone around him was plotting against him. Even the barber was part of this scheme. The boy started to notice some odd things about the task. Why would a B-level knight be sent to take out C-level creatures, or why would he need backup? It was clear something was off. The protagonist knew being ambushed would be a problem. That's why he had to keep his eyes peeled at all times. He was told they were getting closer. Still, the area felt eerily calm. Looking at the young man, he noticed he had his knife out. The protagonist gripped the oil tightly. After cutting his arm, he warned he needed to lure the creatures first. He used his own blood as bait. That should be enough to send the creatures into a frenzy. As he said, it didn't take long for the first one to show up. Along with it, a bunch of others showed up way more than they expected. Since these were sea-level creatures, the protagonist suggested they split up to handle the boat, but he couldn't leave the boy alone. Feeling suspicious, he asked why. Finally showing his true colors, he declared the boy wouldn't leave there alive. He started fighting the protagonist, who was stuck because of the whip on his leg. It hit him fast that he was already at a big disadvantage. The one who tied him up was one of the boat crew. He took off his hood to show who he was. The guy still had a tight grip on the whip. That was Spencer, someone the protagonist knew pretty well. The other young man pushed him to act on their plan right away. Using his strength, he lifted the protagonist off the ground. With one leg frozen, things were looking grim. Freak got tossed into the sea. Spencer wasn't done attacking. He used his power to make the ice even bigger. Now, it would be super tough for the boy to get back to the boat. Ignoring physics, the ice started to sink. They figured this would let the creatures get him. Now they could assume the boy was done for, leaving the monsters to make sure he didn't escape. He needed air fast. To get back up, he thought about using his shield. It can create its own wind, so it might work. It was crazy that the ice sank. He began using magic to make some air. Inside the shield, he managed to catch some breath. He didn't expect those two to team up against him. He was on guard around Razor, but didn't realize there was another threat nearby. A big part of the surface by the boat was frozen, and that wasn't his only issue. There were plenty of creatures around that could be deadly. First, he needed to fix the issue with his leg. With the shield, he should be able to smash through the ice. He finally got free, but his ankle was hurt. That must have happened when the whip hit his skin. The creatures noticed he was bleeding. He quickly called for his sword. He might not have the numbers on his side, but this will be great practice. This is his first big test since coming back, and he can finally use his new skills. His first target is one of the creatures. The sword is shining brightly. He fired an energy blast at the creature. A bunch of light swords appeared in the water, taking out all the threats. It's been a while since he summoned the Starblade formation. Now he can really enjoy the hunt. Creatures are coming at him, but the light swords can take them down. They're heading straight for the creatures. This is the real power of the Caliburn sword. It calls forth several glowing swords that can fly and are as sharp as the original. Soon, all those creatures will be wiped out. Things aren't easy up top either. They need to take out those creatures, using the frozen surface for support. 5 minutes have passed since everything went down. They're sure the boy is already gone. Spencer is impressed by Razor's smarts. That plan was genius. Plus, he can easily take down all those creatures. Razor confirmed he's on a whole different level. It's good the boy stays back. Or he might end up like one of those creatures, but he thinks he can still help. He didn't notice the ice cracking beneath him. The cracks widened, and he went to see what was going on, only to be attacked out of nowhere. The other young man was shocked. Something was happening under the ice. A big hole had opened up. This is bad because a huge creature emerged, ready to eat them. A tentacle from the creature shot up from the water. He has to act fast to avoid getting caught. That creature is a level B, which means it takes several paladins of the same level to take it down. If he's not careful, he could lose his life. To make matters worse, the creature has some tricks, firing projectiles at him, but the knight dodges them all. Now he has to deal with the tentacles coming at him. He knows that if they grab him, it's game over. The quicker he resolves this, the better his chances of survival. His divine weapon lets him channel mana through his strikes, unleashing that energy. Since it works simply, his energy blasts are super powerful. He believes he can take the creature down with just one hit. But the creature is smarter than he thought. The knight finally lands his strongest attack, hitting the monster head-on. But it wasn't the outcome he hoped for, as the creature blocked the hit using another monster's body. This just complicates things for him. Now that his enemy is furious, his life is in serious danger. He needs to get back to the safety of the boat. With the ice completely shattered, he can't get close to the creature. Plus, he has to worry about other monsters in the water that are jumping onto the boat, ready to wipe out all the humans. This takes all his focus, and he doesn't notice a tentacle coming in, hitting him hard in the face. The weapons he has aren't meant for dealing with multiple foes. On top of that, he doesn't have the advantage of the surroundings. He can't just leave the boat. He looks outside as the monsters gather. The longer he stays, the riskier it gets. But even more surprising than the monsters is the sight of the protagonist rising from the water. The boy was thought to be dead, and Neki appears, soaring over his shield and taking down even more monsters. The protagonist sees that the deceiver is in a tricky spot. He just wants to know how the boy managed to survive. Even after being tricked, he's ready to help them out. But Razor doubts the boy can really assist him. That big creature is a B-level monster. There's nothing he can do about it. But the boy has something to show. The closer he gets, the more tentacles appear. The protagonist is ready, still using Caliburn's powers. The blades intercept all the tentacles. Razor can't believe he's mastered his weapon's unique ability. Those skills must be tough to master. Bell warned he'd chop that monster up and turn it into fish food. The creature readies to fire again, blasting water at the boy, who stays calm. That attack could totally wreck the boat. Bell is set to show the creature what he's got, reshaping the light blades into one, all those swords fused, creating a lightsaber that can shoot a focused energy beam. The creature's attack meets the boy's counter, but his will to win is stronger. His strike completely pierced the monster. He even passed over it as the blade cut through. Finally, the creature was taken down. After that hit, it was out of the fight. Its body split in two. It's hard to believe the boy pulled that off. Back on the boat, he decided Spencer would be next, needing to pay for what he did earlier. This boy is definitely going to be a problem for Jin, or so his servant thought. Even after that show of strength, he's set on taking the boy out right there. He warned him a nobody could never beat a bed-level paladin. As he gets closer, the boy is surprised this paladin still thinks he can win. Using Spencer for a surprise attack, he knows he's intimidating him. The two knights size each other up for a moment before launching their attacks. Their weapons finally clash. At first, it seems like the boy isn't under pressure until Razor shows just how much stronger he is, pushing the boy back. Clearly, one of them has the upper hand in strength. He thinks this will decide the fight, but the protagonist is already using his sword's powers, launching a light blade at him. Knowing what they can do, he's worried. Since it's just one blade, defending against it shouldn't be too hard. It's all a setup by the boy to catch him off guard. Razor also taps into his divine armament, completely shattering the light blade. Slowly, its image starts to fade. He thinks the boy will never manage to hit him. So far, their duel seems pretty even. Taking down a B-level paladin won't be easy. His mana is draining fast because of the abilities. Because of this, he's down to his last sword. As a more seasoned knight, he realizes the boy can't keep using that ability without a cost. Charging at him, he wants to finish the fight. His first attack missed the boy, but the second strike in the combo hit him squarely. The boy's still weak body can't take that hit. The gap in their physical strength is turning out to be a huge advantage. He could take his time to finish this, but he's worried about being trapped in the dark. Since close combat is risky, he switched to ranged attacks, firing several shots that the opponent dodged. That was the opening the boy needed to launch a surprise attack. Realizing the boy's plan, he saw it lacked the speed to be effective. He just didn't expect the unexpected. Using the momentum from the shots, he closed the gap, making his hit land even quicker. He nearly took off his enemy's head, but only made him angrier. Seeing his opponent get more furious, he realized his plan was working well, catching him off guard with the last light blade that pierced his back. That was totally unexpected. With a wound that's serious, he can't keep fighting, realizing he completely misread the boy's strategy. Seeing his opponent can't fight anymore, he walked up calmly. He told him it was finally over, and strongly suggested he give up on attacking. The idea of giving up doesn't sit right with him, as he sees the boy as a threat to his master, Jin. That's why the boy has to be taken down right here and now. Seeing his stance, he wondered why he was so devoted to his brother. That's when he dug into his memories. He was already badly beaten in the fight. He had no strength left to keep moving. That was his limit. A man walked up to him, standing over his completely wrecked body. He figured the guy on the ground must be the mercenary behind all those crimes. With the little strength he had, he tried to focus on this person. The young man opened a small flask and poured it over the injured man. He said today was his lucky day because he would now be his master. That's why he's so loyal. Jin accepted him, and he feels he must repay that kindness, no matter what, even as he destroys the boy's light blade. What was left of it was tossed aside. Bell realized his enemy had already decided his fate. He thought he was just a bandit, but respected him as a knight. Now they were ready to fight with everything they had. The young man was still really angry. He was ready to keep the duel going, but Bell had seen that move before. It's powerful, but it takes time to charge up. That's why he'll strike first. The boy had already gone on the attack. As he got closer, he was caught off guard by a knee strike from his opponent, realizing he'd been outsmarted. Now he was in danger of losing. Regaining his composure, he warned that this wasn't the end because he had one last chance. A small piece of the sword had survived, cutting across his opponent's back. That final blow left him unable to fight. He thought he had destroyed all the swords. It's too bad he was wrong about that. The boy had only made it look like they were destroyed, using that to create his strategy for winning. It was like the boy had more battle experience than him, which was hard to explain. That was tough. Without his secret weapon, he definitely would have lost. But he managed to take down Razor, a B-level paladin. That shows he's gotten stronger like he planned. The ship keeps sailing to the continent and finally reaches the city. Stara is searching for her dear brother, but she still hasn't found him. She keeps looking around the castle, but the boy is nowhere to be found. Still, she presses on, wondering if he hasn't come back yet. The issue is that the task he went to do should have been done by now. She noticed the open doors. It was the library. Her brother might be inside, so she headed there to find him. But instead, she ran into someone else. Jin stopped in front of her, making her a bit startled. Even though they were siblings, he felt intimidating. She was scared in that moment, but needed to say hi. When she tried, the words wouldn't come out, all while being stared at by a menacing gaze that left her frozen in fear. As he walked past her, Jin called her worthless. Hesitant, she stepped back until she bumped into something, causing her to look behind. It was her brother who found her, and he asked Jin what he wanted with Sarah, but he didn't answer. The girl finally felt joy at seeing her brother. It was great to know he was back safe. Still, he had been hurt again. He said he had run into a tough monster this time, a B-level paladin named Razor. Even after hearing that, Jin didn't react at all. Bell warned that the young man had messed up his trap. Jin simply said no one cared, since they were just small bumps in his way. And the same went for that silly girl they called his sister. Now he would keep moving because he had no time for bumps. The main character had something to say. He told his brother he would take over as Duke since Jin couldn't protect their family. He spun around, glaring at the boy with a fierce look, his presence overwhelming. But Bell didn't flinch at all. Jin smirked slightly. Finding it amusing, he burst into even louder laughter. Sometimes it could be fun to check out the pebbles. As he left the library, he warned his brother he could try to take him out anytime. Sarah was really anxious about that talk, but the main character quickly calmed her down. Knowing how scary it was, the pressure felt unreal. Her brother was something else. There was a massive gap in strength between them. To beat him, Bell needed to level up before finishing the academy. A few days had gone by since that incident. He had his bags ready to go. The Duke was waiting for him, and seeing the boy all set, he thanked his dad for the support. The academy requires students to have bodyguards. The Duke would send a B-level paladin with him. He said he'd be there for the boy. With that, Bell wanted to ask the Duke something, who let him speak up. But before he could ask, he was surprised to see his sister show up, all packed and ready. She apologized for being late and brought her suitcase over. He asked if his sister could join him on the trip. The Duke was curious about the boy's reasons. He didn't want to leave her behind and wanted them to stick together. But that just wasn't possible. The academy only allowed bodyguards, and he wasn't going there for fun. Sarah tried to convince her dad to change his mind, but he told her not to ask again. To fix the issue, he suggested she be his bodyguard. With her by his side, he was sure he could do anything, even beat an 11-level paladin. The Duke paused for a moment, finding the boy's comment funny, and said he could do whatever he wanted. The carriage rolled off toward the academy. Sarah was really impressed by all the sights. They had finally reached their destination. That building was absolutely stunning. She felt proud of her brother's success. This was a school just for nobles. While he attended class, he asked Sarah to study in their room. They needed to settle in quickly, but they stumbled upon a few students sparring. It was a friendly match, a great chance to watch and learn. Sarah was impressed. Everyone looked really strong, but the protagonist noticed they still seemed to be at D level. One boy really stood out, catching the protagonist's eye, but he was only at C level, so he couldn't outdo the protagonist. Only 2 students were left in the match, and the boy thought today was his day to win. He charged his opponent, determined to finally beat him, but the other guy wasn't scared. He let the attack get dangerously close. Even Sarah was anxious for him. His reaction was even more surprising since he caught his opponent off guard. It only took 1 hit. It didn't even look like he used a divine weapon. He was definitely at B level, maybe even stronger than the protagonist. Even the other students were amazed by what happened. The Rothwinzer's representative was incredible. This left the protagonist really worried because he knew they were a rival family, historical enemies. Because of that, he was their enemy too, along with his sisters. The admission ceremony at the academy was about to kick off. They were congratulating the new students starting their first year. This was led by the student council president, who hoped all these freshmen would be really strong. Albert, a third-year student, came from a family known for producing many famous paladins. He hadn't crossed paths with Albert in his past life, but he knew that by 18, Albert had already hit a certain level. He started to wonder if he had played a part in that incident. It was possible he was one of the culprits. People were saying that the kid was pretty intimidating, and already at a higher level. It looked like more students in the council were at that level too. The council was made up of the top 4 from the martial arts event, and the president was the champion of that competition. Albert was definitely powerful, but the protagonist wasn't sure if he was the one who tormented him. To avoid future attacks, he needed to show his enemies just how strong he could be. The academy didn't hold elections for the council. Students were picked based on their fighting skills. The protagonist wanted to join in too, hoping to take down Albert in a fight. He sat in class waiting for the professor. Someone was coming over to sit next to him. He asked if that seat was taken. Bell replied that it was free and he could sit there. The boy's name was Lime Flexial, and he hoped they'd have a great time at the academy. But something about him caught the protagonist's eye. That last name sounded familiar. Noticing the protagonist's reaction, Lime got a bit curious. He brushed it off, but seemed pretty surprised. Years down the line, he would take out some nobles for personal revenge, earning the title of the Knight of Retribution. Even though he was just a small part of who he'd become, Lime asked for the protagonist's name. He was about to respond when he remembered his dad's advice not to reveal his family name. Mena might help him just because of his surname, which could mess up his goals at the academy. He needed to prove himself through his own hard work. The name he came up with was Libel Slayer. He planned to keep his identity hidden until he defeated Albert. When he heard that surname, Lime figured he was also from the commoner class. The insignia on their uniforms showed their class. Commoners had a circle, while nobles had a star. Bell confirmed he was a commoner too, while Lion came from a line of commoners. In that school, many were from noble families, with commoners being the minority. Since they were in the same class, he hoped they'd get along. It was cool for the main character to make friends with a promising knight. Lime could be a great ally. In his past life, he never had friends, so this was actually nice. A boy was walking toward them, and he already knew Lime. It looked like he came over just to annoy him. This was Roger. He didn't expect to see his hometown friend in the same class. Everyone knew he was the Count's son and already at D level. He was curious why that little boy was there too. He must have taken the entrance exam like everyone else. Roger congratulated him for that, but Lime looked pretty uncomfortable. As I got closer, he warned that Athena wasn't for him since he was just a commoner, suggesting he leave soon. The boy got really uneasy, and Roger said that slaves should obey their masters and that he could easily crush someone like him with just words. Bell stepped in, saying that was enough. Lime felt anxious for his new friend. Roger wanted to know who this boy was and quickly noticed he was also a commoner. Looking at him with disdain, Bell told the boy to leave, no matter if he was a commoner or not. Roger decided to let him go, making a sudden move toward the boy. He kicked Lime. Bell started to worry about his new friend. Roger was enjoying the whole thing. Bell called him a bastard who shouldn't even think of being a paladin. Since he was noble, he should care about commoners. But he claimed the poor were just there to be used by nobles. Bell warned that his view was pretty narrow. A county could fall just as fast as a commoner. Roger looked ready to use magic, asking if the boy wanted to fight him. Now he had his divine weapon ready. Seeing that a fight was unavoidable, he told Lime to step back. He was getting ready to summon his divine weapon too. Roger was really curious about that. The protagonist warned he'd knock some sense into him. Seeing that Sheath made him dislike Roger even more, he figured anyone with such a useless divine weapon must be a nobody, one that couldn't even squash a fly. The protagonist shot back that if that was true, then Roger was even less than a fly. He hated being looked down on by commoners, and decided he needed to finish him off. The protagonist was eager to see if he could actually do that. The whole class was now interested in the fight. Roger charged at him, not realizing he was just a side character. The protagonist was ready for a fight, keeping a close eye on his opponent. But suddenly, a mysterious hand appeared between them. The girl with the lyre managed to stop the fight. The sound it made unsettled both of them. Then she told them not to fight since they were in the same class, and asked them to listen to her. Belle had no idea who this girl was, but she kept playing her liar. Introducing herself, she said her name was Silpha. She was from the Elpige family, a house of Marquesses, which was a higher noble rank than Roger's. The teacher walked in, telling the students to sit down, because class was about to start. For the first task, she would check her students' skills. They had to use their divine weapons and attack the target like it was a monster. They needed to aim at those golems and show what they could really do. The first student stepped up, charging at the target with a sword and landing the first hit. But the target was too tough. He couldn't do much, just a very shallow cut. Right away, the structure healed itself, and the protagonist noticed. Several other students tried to attack it too. The teacher saw that most students were still at E level, since most could barely deal any elemental damage. Now it was Lime's turn to show what he could do. That spear had no magical power. He must have been the only one at F level in this evaluation. The boy lunged at the target, stabbing his spear into it. Like a few others, he got thrown back. Roger called him a useless kid who couldn't use magic. The boy began to rise. Roger was ready to show how he stood apart from the rest. His divine weapon shone brightly. He attacked confidently, driving his scythe into the target and causing major damage. Some classmates were impressed. The teacher liked his performance since he was at D level. Roger thought he must be the top student in the class. Now it was the blonde girl's turn. It was finally her moment to shine. She began playing her lyre, launching her attack. The sound disturbed her classmates, and the sound waves caused even more damage. Those two were on a whole different level than the others. Roger was polite to her, mainly because she was a higher-ranking noble. He did that to keep up appearances, but she told him she'd rather he not do that. She had already thought about it. At the academy, everyone was equal. Noble titles didn't matter there. Roger felt annoyed being overlooked. Next up was the protagonist, and the arrogant boy thought the commoner would fail since he had just a sheath. Belle apologized, saying he wouldn't use it as a weapon, and instead wielded Caliburn. Roger was stunned that the boy had more than one divine weapon. The blonde girl and his new friend were surprised too. After his shock wore off, Roger saw the weapon had no magic, and after hitting the target, he got pushed back. The protagonist just hoped he'd pay attention. He was about to launch his attack. With a flurry of strikes, he completely obliterated the target. All that was left were just fragments. His classmates were totally stunned by that show of power. Even the teacher was taken aback. The golem got sliced up without any magic involved. With the boy's skills, he didn't even need magic. Roger couldn't believe a regular guy could be this talented. Line went over to his new buddy to give him props for what he did. He said it was easy. Even Lime could pull it off. The boy was really impressed. He still hadn't figured out magic. Belle reassured him that he was right about the boy. His divine armament had huge potential. If he kept at it, he could become the strongest holy knight. Lime felt super shy from those kind words until the blonde girl stepped in. She wanted to know how that boy was so skilled, but her closeness made him uneasy. A bunch of other students were curious too. Some didn't even catch his strikes. One of them claimed his sword had to be the strongest divine artifact among the freshmen. Roger heard this and, scared, the boy quickly corrected himself, saying Roger's weapon was better. That just made him even angrier. The day's task was over. The next lesson would be a hands-on test. They'd be hunting monsters in the forest behind the school, and everyone needed to be ready. The students were still eager to learn more about that talented boy. Roger called for his bodyguard, who showed up right away. He looked worn out and pretty unwell. Roger had brought a familiar for protection, which he'd need for tomorrow's mission. The knight asked if he wanted to use it during the task. The boy said that was fine, and his knight remarked that the young master's actions were always brave. Roger was eager to see the fear on the faces of the commoners and lower nobles because he planned to send that cocky commoner to his doom. Outside the academy, they were getting ready for class. The monsters there started at F level, and some E level ones were also let loose. Their job was to hunt these beasts. Whoever took down the most would earn extra points. Roger couldn't hide his mean streak. At last, the practice kicked off. It was their chance to show what they could do. The girl wanted to compete with the main character for first place. Little did she know that spot was already taken. He had to prove his strength to everyone. Lime wanted to tag along since he wasn't confident enough to fight solo yet. He let him come, but made it clear he wouldn't hold back. Running towards the forest, he told him to keep up. It wasn't long before they ran into several creatures, but they weren't a real threat to the protagonist, who was slicing through them like they were nothing. His classmates were also really into it. He had already taken down 15 monsters. It was so easy it barely felt like a warm-up. Lion was impressed with how his classmates were doing, but there was no time to chat. One of the creatures snuck up behind the boy, but the protagonist saved him. He had to stay sharp since there were more creatures than he expected. Limey had to confront his own fears. His classmates were doing fine, and the monsters were falling. He knew he had to push himself way harder. Hidden in the forest, Roger kept an eye on his rivals. Filled with jealousy, he thought those commoners were too full of themselves. That's why he planned to make them pay. Soon, they would meet their end. Holding a staff, he was about to summon something. The main character noticed the magic circle and got really curious. A creature was coming out of it, a huge monster that could control fire. That was a dangerous salamander. Its massive mouth was filled with deadly teeth. All the students were freaked out by what they saw. While they ran away, the main character stood his ground. Line couldn't believe a creature like that had shown up, ready to attack anyone, leaving him terrified. Once again, the protagonist had to save him by blocking the flames with his shield. He told the boy to run with the others. A B-level creature shouldn't have appeared, but that didn't matter now. This was going to be exciting. The protagonist was already using his powers, sending light swords at the creature. They sliced through its tough scales. Roger was surprised that the commoner could use such unique abilities. He needed to up the challenge and called for his knight again, who was ready to follow his commands. The creature was surrounded by the light swords. Lion thought that was amazing. His classmate was taking on a powerful creature. It was time for it to go down. The light swords were set to strike a fatal blow, but the knight interfered, stopping the boy's attack, and he quickly figured out what was going on. Someone else in the forest started walking toward them, saying that ability was really impressive. Assuming he was the creature's master, he asked what he wanted. The knight declared he wouldn't leave without the boy's head. The salamander started launching fireballs while the knight attacked too. Their attacks clashed, creating a massive cloud of steam. He used the wind from his shield to clear it away. But the knight had already set up a trap, using a water prison to trap those blades. They looked like they were out of commission. That water prison had shut down his powers. That was definitely a B-level paladin. The main character found himself up against tough foes. The salamander and the knight kept attacking. Now he had to handle both, blocking one hit with his shield while slicing at the other with his sword. With his current strength, this was way too much for him. Lime was unsure about what to do. At this pace, his friend was going to lose. He spotted Roger deep in the woods. Something about him seemed off. That was his family's staff for summoning. He rushed over to Roger, who looked surprised to see him. He asked if that familiar was his. He needed to stop this Naozao, since the main character was in danger. Roger attacked him right away, telling the weakling to stay down. It was sad that he couldn't do anything to help. He started recalling his training days as a kid. It was embarrassing that he couldn't use magic and had been humiliated by that boy many times. But things couldn't stay like this, so he got up, remembering the protagonist's encouraging words. It was the first time someone had said something nice to him. He refused to let his friend die because he was determined to save him. Roger couldn't believe that Weakling thought he could beat him. Worms were just worms. Lime told him to shut it and that he shouldn't judge his worth without asking. Roger started feeling a bit uneasy. He warned that he wouldn't lose just because the boy could use magic now. Lime agreed with that. The idiot's scythe began to glow too. He needed to take out the trash now. But Lime was radiating confidence. His spear managed to freeze those flames, making them vanish completely, which was totally unexpected. The real trash had red hair. Roger was getting angrier, charging at his classmate with fury. Lime's spear was way stronger and blocked the attack. Their weapons clashed and got stuck together. Roger was in shock, but Lime knew what he was doing. With ease, he shattered the boy's divine weapon, making him drop to his knees. He couldn't wrap his head around it. There was no way he lost to an F-level paladin. It was odd that Lime ever feared that loser, because now he felt nothing at all. He told him to hand over the summoning staff. Roger asked if he knew what he was doing. Coming from a powerful county, he could wipe out the boy's whole family, but it seemed he still didn't get the reality of the situation. Lime tried to talk sense into the boy while freezing his legs, telling him again to give up the staff. With his pride shattered, he agreed to hand it over, begging to be spared and promising not to be cruel again. He was totally defeated and humiliated. The staff had officially changed hands. Lime warned Roger to keep his distance from him and his friend, or things could get messy. He finally relaxed a bit while Roger thought of his next move. The chain of his weapon was still close by. And suddenly, the other end started glowing. A sneak attack was underway. Roger thought he could take down that boy, but Lime was totally aware, blocking the weak attack. It was really pathetic that he chose to act like that. The summoning staff lay on the ground, completely wrecked by the boy, leaving Roger speechless. He couldn't believe it was destroyed. Slowly, the salamander began to fade away. It was a shocking turn of events that night, and he realized something had happened to his master. From a distance, he saw he had been taken down, so he turned his focus to the other commoner. But he couldn't act easily. He didn't have time to get distracted. The real mastermind behind all this had been found out. It looked like he wanted to take down the protagonist. It's a shame it had to end this way. In a fair fight, that knight would never beat him. All he could do was curse the kid, shooting at him multiple times but missing every single shot. Things just got a lot more complicated. Even though that knight was B-level, he was still at the bottom of the ranks. The protagonist hit him on the head with the hilt of his sword. The difference in their skills was way too big. Bell warned he'd turn him into the teacher, so he had to pull out his last trick. He immediately threw himself down and begged for mercy. It was so sudden that the protagonist was taken by surprise. The knight insisted he was just following orders from his master. Ignoring a noble was definitely not an easy thing to do. That's exactly what the knight wanted, to catch the boy off guard and finally get forgiveness. He thanked him, but secretly planned to betray him. Only then did the boy warn him he was just messing around, getting ready to strike with his sword. He had already guessed he might be tricked. Limes approached his friend to check if he was okay. The protagonist knew Lime's support had kept things from getting worse. The boy was just returning the favor. That handshake sealed their friendship. Other students showed up too, thanking them for their help. It was impressive he had taken down a B-level knight, but that wasn't all that happened. That knight was one of Roger's allies, and the fire salamander was linked to them. He was definitely a nasty guy, and now Lime was getting praised by his classmates. It looked like he really was strong in the end. Lime humbly thanked them for the compliments. As expected from the knight, he would become one day. Someone had been watching everything from a distance. The blonde girl seemed to like what she saw, understanding how that boy's divine weapon worked. The task was finally done, and Roger would face consequences. The girl was waiting for them at the end of the hall. She had something to tell the protagonist. As he looked at her, he remembered her name was Silpha and asked what she needed. She already knew it was called Avalon, his divine armament, which caught him off guard. She also recognized it as the sacred weapon of past heroes. He was puzzled about how she knew about Avalon. From his expression, she was spot on. She was the first to identify that divine armament. Her goal was straightforward, but it seemed to worry the protagonist. She put her hands together in front of him. Bowing politely, she asked if she could see the weapon. He hadn't seen that coming. She had always admired that legendary armament, so she wanted a look. Since it was a simple ask, he showed her the sheath. She was really impressed. She hadn't thought it was actually real. The protagonist was curious about how she knew about it. She mentioned a family legend about a hero with a sheath that held many weapons. It was possible one of his ancestors was related to her family. Lime didn't get the full story, but sensed his friend's divine armament was something special. The girl was super thankful since one of her dreams came true. To show her gratitude, she suggested they hang out one day. There was a great cafe in town, and they should definitely check it out sometime. Lime loved that idea, and the protagonist thought it'd be fun to explore the city. He agreed, but mentioned he'd bring someone along. The young group was now at the cafe. Sarah was loving the taste of that strawberry pie. Belle was thrilled that her sister was enjoying herself, too. She hadn't expected the protagonist to have such a beautiful sister. Sarah felt a bit shy from the compliment. The protagonist enjoyed having fun with her even more. He was really enjoying himself. He'd never experienced anything like this before. The blonde girl asked everyone to pay attention. She was about to play a song for them. Hearing music from a divine weapon sounded cool. She started playing her lyre, but it sounded terrible. Her playing was pretty bad. She knew she wasn't good at it. She was just trying to entertain her friends. Others found it funny and encouraged her to keep playing, suggesting parts for him to sing too. The two of them were putting on a show for everyone in the cafe. It turned into a really fun performance. Those two were his first real friends ever. Outside, they were chatting about how much fun it had been. The girl wanted to take Sarah shopping for clothes. He didn't want his sister to go alone, but his friend said it was a girl thing. The protagonist felt a bit let down. He just asked to be kept in the loop, and the girl realized he was a great brother. Sarah asked if she had any siblings. A bit sad, she replied that she didn't. It looked like someone was searching for Silpha. That person's name was Ivalain. He was a member of the student council. It was an odd way for the Haas siblings to meet. She should have been nicer, but she didn't see him as a brother. He was there to help her train. If her divine weapon was perfected, it could be useful to him someday. She had already told him she wasn't interested in fighting. He rolled up his sleeves and said her attitude was really inconvenient. It looked like he'd have to force her to change her mind. Blood started to trickle from his hand, then it began to pour out. Sarah was really scared by what she saw, and the boy was controlling it effortlessly. She called for Mary, her bodyguard, to help with her blood-based weapon. But the boy had already taken charge of everything. When she looked back, she realized her bodyguard had been beaten. That made things even worse. Her brother insisted they had to leave right away, telling Sarah to run because it could get dangerous. She needed to use her weapon for protection, but she couldn't handle that attack. The young man figured that if she called for help, things would get messy, so he had to fix it fast. Just as Sarah was about to be attacked, her brother's friend swooped in to save her. Silpho collapsed on the ground over the weekend. It was a silly move, but now she couldn't fight back against him. He used his power to lift her off the ground. Sarah was still really scared, and the blonde girl had passed out. This was all caused by her own brother. In desperation, Sarah called out for the protagonist's help. He rushed in, slicing through the boy's tentacles, catching him off guard. The blonde girl was saved. Seeing that made Sarah feel relieved, but the protagonist wanted to know what this guy wanted with his friend. Their nice moment had been ruined. The mysterious guy asked if the protagonist was one of his sister's friends. It wasn't really important, but it was better if he stayed out of family issues. The protagonist told Line to watch over the girls because he was ready to take this guy on. The guy was surprised by his confidence. He warned that defending that girl wasn't worth it. Cutting through those attacks with his sword was easy, which impressed the guy. Helping a friend is totally natural. As he struck at him, the guy raised a shield, saying this was just a waste of time. That blood shield is pretty impressive. Looks like his sword isn't going to cut it. He can't afford to waste his mana here. The guy was ready to strike, but the protagonist dodged it. Finding the protagonist really annoying, he said he'd wrap things up fast, launching a bunch of predictable attacks. Then the boy pulled out the fire spitter. Noticing the boy had more than one divine weapon, he realized this opponent was no joke. Now it was the protagonist's turn to fire back, successfully blocking all incoming attacks. Looks like they're at a standstill. Blocking his attacks just made the fight more complicated. But he's set on capturing his sister, creating a spear from blood. That move will be the final one. The protagonist agreed it would be. They both went all out in their attacks. Some folks on the rooftop thought this was pretty interesting. Looking up, they noticed new arrivals. One of them landed hard, cracking the sidewalk. He dropped right between the two, showing off his strength. He wanted to jump into that fight too. The protagonist recognized him as part of the student council. While the blue-bearded guy wondered what Zul was doing there, he lamented being too tough on the kids. The girl pointed out that his behavior was pretty embarrassing since he's such a weakling. Seeing his two friends, he chose to stop his attacks. But Zul wished the fight could go on a bit longer. Glowing all over, he said it was best to go all out. His whole body was covered in armor. He was not just big, but had a strong presence. The girl told the muscular guy to do his part, while she summoned several chains. That was needed to stop him from making any drastic moves. They weren't there to keep fighting. Seeing her magic, the protagonist realized she's really strong. Zio easily broke the chains. He mentioned that Evelyn has duties with the student council and Albert's company. Because of that, he'll be off on an expedition in the forest for a month. The mission starts right away. He knew he had no choice. As he left, he warned he'd take his sister in a month. The girl waved goodbye to the weak newbie. It's a relief they're all gone. The student council members are all beasts. He looked back to check on his friends. She said she was fine and apologized for dragging him into this. But the protagonist said it was okay. He just wants to understand why she and her brother are at odds. He wants to use her since he's the next heir. After graduation, he plans to expand his territory by attacking uncharted areas. Lime knows those lands are full of strong creatures. Her brother thinks her divine weapon will be a major asset in the war, but she doesn't want to fight. Her goal is to get stronger and become the heir. It's the same situation the protagonist faces. The issue is she feels powerless. She's nowhere near strong enough to beat him. Sarah disagreed, saying that girl was able to protect her. It seems that gave her a glimmer of hope. Sarah is really thankful for what happened. Even the protagonist wants to show his gratitude, so he approached the girl. Being able to say someone makes him strong is something he couldn't do before. He told her to believe in herself, because if she's lacking strength, she can always train. Lime said she'd help her too. At first, she didn't know what to say, but she's really thankful for her new friends. The protagonist realizes that last attack could have been deadly. He'll be back in a month, so Bell needs to get stronger. To do that, he has to unlock his special ability and talk to the comedian. He needs the predecessor's okay to gain new skills and must head back to that place. He closed his eyes and focused, directing his mana through the sheath. All the predecessors welcomed him. It's been a while since they last met. The boy has a favor to ask, but they already know what it is since they witnessed the last battle. That artifact was a bit tricky. That guy can shake things up pretty easily. It looks a lot like Avalon itself. They fell into a short silence. The comedian warned that if he burns that blood, everything will be sorted out. The boy thinks the same, which is why he wants his unique ability. The comedian agreed to do it without a second thought, just to show it was all a joke. He really loves being a comedian. Charlotte told him to cut out the nonsense, but it's way stronger than him. Being funny is awesome, and that ability uses a ton of magical energy. If he uses it now, he'll be completely wiped out soon, but he has a catch for it. Before the rematch, he has to fire 300 shots each day. Only then will he think about giving the boy the ability. The issue is that this seems impossible. The most he can manage is 100 shots in one day. But the comedian doesn't want to hear excuses, and once he hits that goal, he has to come back. After he spoke, he snapped his fingers. The boy found himself back in his body, realizing that besides being funny, the comedian is a bit harsh. He soon figured out that to use the ability, he'll need to triple his current magical power. The problem is, this might not be doable. The predecessors agree that this challenge is impossible. The boy can't boost his magic that much, but everyone's curious to see how he does. If he doesn't get stronger, he won't win. The main character headed into the forest. There, he started taking shots at some creatures. It's not too hard to do, but it's definitely tiring. The only way to boost his magic is by hunting, so he plans to take down everything he could find. His friends are amazed by his strength. It was great that they joined him too. Everyone wants to get stronger. That's how she got Line to join as well. The urge to get stronger beats the fear. The protagonist really has great friends who help him improve. After firing 100 shots, he felt wiped out, but he did gain a bit of power from hunting. But it still wasn't enough. That progress is far from ideal. Then he heard a scary roar in the forest that didn't sound like an orc. His friends might be in trouble. Finally, the protagonist spotted the creature. It was lying on the ground like it was asleep. Next to it were his two friends, celebrating their success. The girl praised Bell for his efforts. Evening was eager to find out if his friends had taken down that creature, and they had. It was a sea-level creature. He thought his friends were weaker. Since they couldn't beat it normally, they came up with a smart plan. First, they trapped the enemy in ice. Then the girl attacked with sound waves that bounced off the ice. It was a really clever strategy. Those two have a cool synergy. That was the outcome of their joint attack. And the protagonist had a thought too. Now he knows how to take more shots. Meanwhile, more creatures showed up. A bunch of orcs just like the one they had taken down. A big group like that is going to be a real hassle since they're all pretty worn out. But the protagonist has a clever idea. He can still keep going. They never expected the protagonist to pull off all that. Seeing him rush off, the girl remembered he had something to handle. The others didn't think he'd be back so soon. The comedian hopes he's not trying to change the deal. But the boy claimed he had finished the task, which left them pretty shocked. There's no way he did that in just one day. The comedian said he's the one making jokes here. But the boy stood his ground. They challenged him to show it in a fight. He'd have to shoot all those rounds during battle, and could use other weapons if he wanted. Unless, of course, he was scared. The protagonist was really into that challenge. He just needed the signal to start, and the fight would kick off. They were ready, and the comedian was excited to see how it went. The elder gave the go-ahead. Bell had his pistol ready, but the comedian fired the first shot, hitting the boy. He said the boy was too slow and needed to step it up. As expected from the original user of that weapon, he was way faster. Looks like the comedian is in his 100 jokes mode, and the protagonist isn't about to lose this duel. They both fired multiple times, leaving the comedian pretty impressed. Charlotte said the boy was really good, and now she got why the elder chose to train him. He's definitely proud of his student. The shy one mentioned that the real battle was still ahead, and Charlotte didn't like his tone, but he reminded them they needed to see if the boy could still shoot. Even Adam thought that 100 shots wouldn't cut it. The boy kept pushing himself, but it still wasn't enough to challenge the comedian. They kept firing off shots. The boy was getting a bit tired and losing his groove. Adam had kept track, and the boy had fired 97 shots. Seeing it was getting boring, the comedian was ready to wrap it up. But the protagonist had a secret weapon. He called forth a powerful shield. This would help him protect himself a bit better, making the comedian rethink his game plan. The boy was also going to use the wind, channeling it through the pistol. And the comedian was curious about his plan. The protagonist said those bullets were pointless. He managed to boost his shot with the wind, surpassing the comedian's strength, who was pretty shocked by the outcome. This combo let him amp up his power even with low magical energy. For the first time, the comedian felt pressured in this match. Even the boy's mentor hadn't considered that possibility. Charlotte was cheering him on, hoping he could take down the comedian. The comedian wondered why the boy didn't use that strategy earlier, reminding him he had fallen for a trick before, and now it was time for payback. But hiding that ability might not change the outcome. Now the boy had to dodge all those shots, making the battle much more even again. The protagonist managed to counter the comedian's first shot since his magical power was running low too. While the boy stuck to his plan, things had gotten pretty tricky. His opponent was feeling the pressure. It was time to finish this. But the comedian was no easy foe. He hid behind flames, keeping the boy from figuring out his real position. Not only did he not know where the shots were coming from, but he also got hit in the back, giving him a clue about the comedian's location. But the comedian had already moved, hitting the boy again. All he had to do was stay hidden in the flames since the protagonist was completely trapped. He needed to push those flames away with the wind, and that's exactly what he did to find the comedian, who could no longer hide behind the flames. He could finally see his target clearly, but he couldn't pull the trigger. Things were definitely getting tricky. The others thought he might be out of magic, leaving him wide open for the comedian. But the comedian was out of bullets too. The final blow hit, making the comedian drop to his knees. He was pushed to his breaking point, just like the boy who had fired 301 shots. After that, he was completely wiped out. He had won by the tiniest margin. Seeing the boy's hard work, the comedian was thrilled and reached out to him. He finally accepted him and would unlock a special ability for his weapon. He politely helped the boy back up, who was really thankful for the recognition. He needed to master that divine weapon. With a new ability, he felt ready to take on that other jerk. All the comedian wanted was for his student to win, and he promised he would achieve victory. Days went by, and the protagonist kept training in the forest since getting stronger was key. Bit by bit, he was honing his skills. His friends came over to see what was up. That unique ability of his was really something. The girl asked if he could share some tips so they could learn too. All he could say was to keep taking down monsters. That's the only way he knew. But he did have a training method to boost their existing power and practice daily. He learned it from his master. They just need to sit, close their eyes, and focus. Doing that hand gesture is the easiest way to channel magic through your body. If they meditate like that for an hour each day, their magic will grow faster. Besides refining their skills, it would help them release power more easily in battle. They decided to give it a shot too. This practice won't show quick results, but it's really effective over time. His friends started channeling magic through their bodies. The protagonist noticed they were improving way faster than he expected. Their progress might be way ahead of the curve. Not wanting to lag behind, he decided to keep pushing himself. This would also help boost his special ability. But after 5 days, his friends were still at it. By day 10, they were already sparring to get stronger. 20 days went by, and they kept training hard. A month later, they ran into that jerk again. This time, he didn't come alone to grab his sister. It had been a while since they last met. Even the girl had gotten stronger. The jerk told his servant to take the girl while he dealt with this annoyance. The servant got the message, but the girl wasn't going down without a fight, attacking him with her divine weapon. But the servant was quick enough to dodge her strikes. Lime wouldn't let her friend face him alone and charged at the servant with fury. He wouldn't let her be taken from Alice without a fight. Meanwhile, it was time for the protagonist to handle his own issues. He had one question he needed to ask first. What was that guy planning to do with his sister? Her divine weapon is special, handed down through generations, and can control people with sound. This way, she could turn them into tools for battle, making war a lot easier. That's a truly vile goal. He just wants to make his life simpler. To him, his sister is just a tool. The protagonist doesn't need more proof that this guy isn't fit to be called a brother. He realized that anger wouldn't make that weapon work against him. But that's exactly what they were about to witness. He found it odd that the protagonist was aiming the gun at himself while activating his unique ability. The flames were aimed at his own heart, now surrounding his whole body. That's soul incineration, a pretty impressive move. Even though he wasn't impressed, the jerk knew this was going to be a hassle. The protagonist got a major power boost, and wings sprouted from his back. Now all his physical traits were supercharged. He could now close the gap to his enemy much faster. The guy only fired a few shots, but that was pointless since his flames could burn through all that blood, which caught him off guard. It was time for the protagonist to wipe him out completely, throwing punches without a break. The guy quickly put up a shield for defense, which held up against the first hit, but it shattered, so it wouldn't stop the second hit. The protagonist landed a punch right to his face, sending the poor fool flying. The blood he has now is totally useless. He might as well give up and go home, but that's not all he's got. The guy got back up again. His eyes had completely changed too. The surface of his skin looked different. It felt like his blood was boiling. In that form, he was way stronger, and the protagonist couldn't figure out what was going on. That was dragon blood. That ability transformed his whole body. He now looked like a dragon. His power had shot up a lot. That pressure is really a problem. He warned the protagonist to feel both proud and regretful about it. His sharp claws were ready because he was about to unleash his full fury. Bell kept a close eye on his opponent's moves. With his boosted abilities, he managed to dodge it. Still, he got a superficial cut. His opponent was curious. He thought he had landed a hit. While he was distracted, the protagonist set up an attack and shot flames at him. He hit him right on target. Now he made everything explode into the air. The destruction was seriously impressive. A ton of smoke filled the air, but his opponent looked totally fine. He called that attack pathetic. His scales stayed spotless. There were no signs of soot or burns at all. He charged at the protagonist, ready to slice him up. Just fire wouldn't cut it against this opponent. So V decided to take him down with his fists. The two were on a crash course. Bell had to dodge those claws again. Only then could he strike, landing a hit on his opponent's side. Feeling the impact, he wasn't impressed at all. Those scales were tough against hits. The protagonist got lost in his thoughts and got blindsided by the dragon's tail, sending him crashing to the ground. As his opponent prepared a powerful spell to wipe him out, Bell knew he had to defend himself fast, firing a fireball to dodge the hit. But his opponent's attack was way more destructive. A huge explosion went off in the air. The boy looked really worn out. Even though he kept pushing, he was clearly at his limit, and the dragon could pull off several of those attacks. This made things a lot trickier for him since the protagonist had to use even more magic. Meanwhile, his friends were in another fight on the ground. Their enemy was probably at level B. They decided to go for a combined attack. The silent enemy just waited for them to make a move. Lime was the first to charge in, forcing his opponent to defend. The boy had planted his spear in the ground. This made his opponent a bit cautious, finally noticing he was surrounded by ice walls. Now it was the girl's turn to act. She was closing in, sending powerful sound waves at her opponent. They thought that combo would finish off a monster stronger than them. But the knight said it was all pointless. He slammed his staff on the ground, creating a dark circle that swallowed the sound waves of the attack until there was nothing left. The kids were caught off guard as he kept his staff on the ground, preparing an attack that could wipe them out. The dark portal kept expanding, releasing the absorbed sound waves. Now, thanks to that absorption, those attacks were totally useless. The girl was still trying to process what just happened. The knight apologized, but Seki had to take her because of orders from his master. Lime wasn't going to let that slide, and the knight warned him not to get involved. But he wouldn't listen, so he had to be taken down. He was still pretty new to fighting. The girl noticed her friend was also having a tough time. Realizing she needed to help him, she felt desperate because she couldn't move. Meanwhile, the boy was getting beaten badly. She just wished she had a bit more strength to fight back. She remembered the hero's words about training to unlock her power in battle. She just needed to calm down. That way, she could focus on the magic inside her. Feeling ready to fight, she aimed to save her friend. His head was about to be smashed by that staff, but the sound waves shot through the air. Lime managed to react just in time. It wasn't his moment to lose, and the confused knight was baffled by what was happening. That was the result of the sound made by the girl. Lime could hear his friend clearly. The music she played was beautiful, and it turned into strength for the boy, allowing him to push back his opponent and throw him off balance. The knight was clueless about where that kid got all that power. His divine weapon glowed brightly, ready to freeze him. Ice plates rose from the ground, moving toward the knight. who knew he was in deep trouble. He couldn't handle all that ice closing in on him. Meanwhile, the hero was already reaching his breaking point. The fight was wrapping up, but he noticed his friends had pulled through. Now he just needed to take down the jerk in front of him. What he was about to do was a risk since he planned to use his secret weapon. The dragon was curious to see the boy still hiding his true power, but it wouldn't matter soon, as he was about to face real despair. The clash between them heated up even more, with the dragon ramping up his strength for a massive attack. The hero knew his rival was gearing up for a big hit, but he had his own plan. He just needed to hold on long enough for it to work. The dragon finally finished charging his ability, unleashing a huge blast at the hero. That energy sphere was massive, making things way tougher. The boy had to move quickly to avoid losing. His only option was to unleash his flames to block the hit. But the dragon kept building up even more power, a force the hero couldn't take. He was completely overmatched. It looked like the fight was finally done. This wasn't the ending the dragon had wanted. He craved something more exciting. That's when he noticed the hero had appeared right behind him. He had let his guard down and ignored his defense. While he was charging up, the boy had created a clone from his flames, which the dragon had destroyed, an ability he never thought the hero would master. Feeling overconfident, he thought the hero couldn't hurt him since his attacks were weak. Now it was time to show off his training progress, as he had perfected his magic skills. The dragon felt the boy's arm was covered in mana. His attacks might not have worked before, but this punch was going to be different. Looking back, the dragon realized it was pretty dangerous. Those blue flames were the boy's secret weapon, hitting back with his powerful fist, causing him severe and excruciating pain, strong enough to break the dragon's scales. It was unbelievable that he had been beaten by a kid. After a while, he finally managed to open his eyes. He was completely frozen in place. Both he and his servant had lost. After a bit, they finally woke up. The dragon thought the kids would annoy him, but since he lost, it didn't bother him. The girl had something to say. She wouldn't let him start a war or be used by him, and he needed to get that. Surprisingly, he seemed to agree. He would do exactly what the girl wanted. Those words were odd for them to hear, leaving them unsure. Still, Lime lowered her divine weapon, making the ice vanish. The girl told him not to visit her again. Without a word, he just told his mage to follow him. They were now on their way out. That fight had worn everyone out, and it was impressive that the protagonist beat a student council member. He said it was a close call. The girl stood up to chat with her friends, promising to repay their kindness one day. But they were friends, and that wasn't how it worked. Hearing that, she made sure to set things straight. They were best friends. Those words made the protagonist really happy. After this fight, they might attract attention from other student council members. He needed to get stronger, especially against Albert, to avoid another tragedy. He would become the strongest hero and show everyone his strength. Eventually, he'd defeat his brother and lead the family. This time, he would definitely protect his sister. Years went by, and a battle was about to start. The protagonist finally found his brother, but he was much stronger now. Zhen had become the head of the family, but didn't seem to care about titles. He said his little brother was cursed. In his past life, he realized it was a shame not to be able to protect those he cared about. The pain he experienced that day was overwhelming. That's why he's here now. Having faced real suffering, he felt ready to take on any foe. His sister's future depended on it. As Mufasa and Scar prepared to fight, the protagonist thought he could change his fate, launching an all-out attack on his brother.